Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Schwep Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm one of your hosts and current Schwep champion of the world, Michael, and I'm gathered here with my other co-host, Mr. Austin. Austin, I hope you're doing well. Before I give you the floor, I just wanted to say one little piece of information. Some of you guys have been leaving me some comments through some texts and some messages saying, we get it, you're champion of the world, we get it, you don't have to keep flexing that. But as you all know, in fantasy football, nothing is ever guaranteed or promised. I don't know the next time I'm going to be champion of this league. It may never be again. It may be this year again. You never know, knock on wood. But I know many of my league mates would do the same, but I just got to make sure that everybody knows that for this year, I am the current reigning champion. With that being said, Austin, how are you doing today?
Yeah, you never miss the chance to flex, right? Especially in the Schwep universe. I'm doing good. Amazing Miami Dolphins football game tonight. Hoping to go 4-0. We'll get into that in a little bit, but yeah, everything's fun. I'm ready for week 4.
Yes, sir. Last week was very entertaining. We had some really good games. Fantasy aside, a lot of games went down to the wire. We had some interesting stuff, like that Bucs game to overtime. The Raiders game had a really crazy ending. The Detroit Lions had a super crazy ending when the Vikings came back. Just really, really good games across the board, as you and I projected. Fantasy aside, like I just said, the games themselves were just really entertaining to watch. Jaguars having a crazy upset over the Chargers. And then on top of that, our Miami Dolphins getting that super last-second win over the Bills after that infamous, they're now calling it the butt punt, as everybody knows, the butt fumble and stuff. But yeah, man, just a really good, exciting week of games. And hopefully this next week of games will be just as good. And I'm excited to break down this episode. I think that you should start it off with some sleepers, a little recap of how it went, booms and busts, all that, how it all went.
Yeah. I mean, the last week was really, really fun. We kind of said it in the last podcast that, just looking at the over-unders, we figured there would be a bunch of really close games, some high-scoring games. And, I mean, it kind of popped out. It was fun. And just, some of the big things is that we're starting to see now that Lamar Jackson is kind of a league winner. I mean, back-to-back weeks with 50-plus points. He had, 4 passing touchdowns and a rushing touchdown, over 100 rushing yards in 2 consecutive weeks. I mean, he's looking like a god. And you said it, the Jags, they look like an actual team. I mean, who knew Urban Meyer was that dog meat of a coach and that Doug Peterson championship in 2017 with the Eagles would be a solid coach for them. I saw some stuff in the preseason. They really looked like they were trying to turn it around, and there's some really young studs on that team. That team's going to be good for the rest of the year, I imagine. Finns taking the dub over the Bills. Upset alert. Not an upset to us. Come on, man. Let's get it.
Facts.
And Raiders 0-3, a team that everybody thought would be high-powered, super stud, Super Bowl contender, looking like they're on the down. Who knows? They might be worse in the league. We'll see at the end of the year. Maybe that Derek Carr to Devontae Adams connection is not so great. Last week was interesting in terms of the booms or busts. There was a lot of really solid plays from a bunch of different positions, but there was no crazy super 40-50 type booms outside of Lamar Jackson. You had Seidy on the Monday night game kind of get that touchdown. He would have had an even bigger game. He would have been on this booms list if he didn't drop that massive 50-yard pass. Of course, Amari on Thursday night went, 100 and a touchdown was great. Marquise, your MENTA of the week, did well. Olave popped out and had a really, really good game with MT and Jarvis kind of going down late in that game. So the one big bust was, of course, Mr. Justin Jefferson, Jay Jettas. Man, 4 points, man. Come on, Kirk, throw him the ball or something. I don't know what's happening. We saw what happened in week 1. Come on, get it popping. And then some other really, really big notables is that it seems like we're getting into that backup phase for running backs. We got Khalil Herbert, we got Jamal Williams, we got Alexander Madison. A lot of these big, first, second round running backs are going down, and those backups are, those are some premium handcuffs. Almost every week have to start them, must starts if their main running back goes down. So yeah, if you have them on your team, that's a really big come up. But that's pretty much it in terms of recapping.
Yeah, for sure. Some of the receivers like Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, they all have pretty mediocre games for their standards, I would say. Diggs,
Yeah.
not so much. He was able to get like 7 catches for like,
something.
yeah, something like that. Nothing crazy. But Reek and Justin Jefferson for sure had some really weird weeks. And then this trend continues. These top running backs that everybody projected to do crazy things are just lackluster.
Yep.
Barely scraping top 10 RB plays every week. So it's really crazy. I always like try to see other sources for their rankings and stuff. And all these rankings, I'm like, yeah, for sure, Dalvin will be there, Henry will be there. But then in my head, I'm like, all right, how much weight do these rankings actually hold? Because through 3 weeks, nothing's actually like staying put. Nothing's actually real. Like, so it's really interesting to see how everything's playing out so far in the NFL, man. It's crazy. Fantasy's so unpredictable. Wide receivers are just taking over, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly really crazy that, and I was thinking about the fact that we're kind of seeing, it's like one of those shift years where you have a few years where the same picks are in those first, second, third rounds. And I think after this year, going into next year, we're going to start seeing a lot of those picks kind of shift out of those rounds. And we're going to have the guys behind them moving up, or the rookies coming into those rounds, breakout players, things of that nature. And it just seems like the names that we're so used to in the past couple of years are kind of going to be phased out here soon, which is kind of sad to think about. But yeah, they're going to be phased out soon. We're going to be moving into a new era. But there's a lot of stud players. And it seems like, especially in our league, the talent, and now that we're in keeper especially, the talent is really kind of spread evenly amongst the league. I think that people kind of had the mindset that they want to make sure they have somebody that they can hold on to long term. But yeah, especially in our league, it seems like there's a lot of players that people are interested in. Like I'm interested in Garrett Wilson. We have some other players amongst other people in the league, like Olave. I know Ray really likes him. So yeah, it's interesting to see where the league's going to be and where fantasy mock drafts are going to be in the next year or two.
Yeah, it's definitely sad because like when I started growing up doing fantasy football, like my first year I ever did a draft, I got number 1 pick my first year ever, didn't know anything about fantasy. Number 1 pick, everybody was like, you got to go Adrian Peterson. When Adrian Peterson. So like people like Adrian Peterson, Jamal Charles, Marshawn Lynch, all these types of players, it's sad to see like they fall out. Like that's how football works. Matt Forte, all those types of players. And I have a feeling, like you said, we're starting to get into those years where Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, all these players are starting to phase out. And we even saw it in the beginning of this year when Justin Jefferson and Cooper Kupp and Jamar Chase are being considered in that first round ADP wise. Whereas last year it was strictly 1 through 9 were like straight RBs by all fantasy experts. So we saw it start to bleed in a little bit this year. And I have a feeling, like you just said, more and more, all these players are going to start to bleed into the higher rounds and stuff, and all those names are going to start to fade out. And that's pretty interesting landscape-wise, because I have a feeling it kind of gives everybody more of an even playing field. Like, obviously, there's people who are stronger in the league and people who are, like, considered weaker, who aren't, like, as good as fantasy as you would say. And those players being at weird ADPs, everything jumbled up, kind of evens the playing field a bit. So that's pretty interesting. Yeah,
I definitely agree. agree. So, I mean, with that, you want to go ahead and get into injuries? I know there's a shitload of them. It's getting rough.
Yeah, for sure. There is a lot of injuries. So with that being said, let's get into that injury report for week 4. Starting with some quarterbacks, Mac Jones, he suffered a really bad ankle injury right towards the end of that Ravens game. Really unfortunate. Fortunate for us because the Patriots in our division, so I want them to lose any chance I can. But he did suffer a severe high ankle sprain. From what I've seen online, it's somewhere between 3 to 6 weeks that he's going to be out for. So you should be downgrading all fantasy relevant players for New England. There's not that many this year. So that's pretty unfortunate. He was a do not practice yesterday and Thursday. I saw a quote on Sleeper from a notification that said that they're not ruling him out for week 4, which to me just sounds like super cap. Probably some Bill Belichick spew right there. So Mac Jones, he's out. That sucks. Jameis Winston, he's been dealing with those back fractures. He was able to pull through and battle through it last week. But he's been a do not practice yesterday, and he was a do not practice again today. And as many of us know, they are in London this week for that 9:30 early kickoff game on Sunday. So that's definitely something to keep an eye out for all Saints players, because we know there's some fantasy relevant players there. And then going over to another quarterback really quickly, Zach Wilson. He should be back and ready to roll this week. The quote is from him that he's 100% ready to go. So if you're a New York Jets fan, I'm sure you're very happy. You want to see your team at full strength as best as you can. So Zach Wilson's back, so that should be good for every fantasy relevant player there. And then getting into some running backs, we had Jonathan Taylor. He was dealing with a toe injury. He was a do not practice Wednesday. There wasn't anything too alarming about it. However, I saw an interesting tweet today. It was kind of like an Iron Man tweet. Yesterday was the first practice that Jonathan Taylor ever missed throughout high school, college, and the NFL so far. So that's really crazy. Obviously, that's why he was the number one pick, for that durability, not missing a game, being really consistent, getting that workload of touches, and still being able to be healthy. But good news is he was back today practicing. So Jonathan Taylor owners, nothing to fear there. He should be ready to roll. Going into another running back, David Montgomery. He dealt with a knee injury, which allowed Khalil Herbert to absolutely explode last week. We'll get into that later on in the show. He's considered day-to-day. He was a do not practice Wednesday and today on Thursday, which is really unfortunate. Coaches aren't really giving too much detail onto it, but a DNP Wednesday and Thursday is never a good sign. I'm not really sure where to go with this. I would pivot away from him if I was a Montgomery owner. If you have Herbert, you're probably going to start him this week after the performance he had, especially with Montgomery. Even if he is to play, it might be a limited workload. Staying on the ground, Christian McCaffrey, huge injury. Kind of came out of nowhere, really out of the blue. He's dealing with a thigh injury. He was a DNP yesterday, and then we just got word that he was also a DNP today. Super unfortunate news. He's been dealing with little injuries. He's been all over the report the first week 1 and week 2, and now we're seeing another thing. Not great news there. As we know, he was a highly coveted pick. We hope that this was the year where he was going to be healthy. So keep an eye out for that. He could pop up on a limited practice report tomorrow, and that can give you some good news. As elite players like that, all they really need is one practice on a Friday to give them that sign, okay, they're probably good to go. But McCaffrey, man, really big injury there, so keep an eye out for that. Staying on the ground, Dalvin Cook, he's dealing with another shoulder injury. It's the same shoulder injury he's been dealing with throughout his high school and college career. That one shoulder it seems to just keep popping out. He's dealt with it back-to-back seasons now. I just hope that he can battle through that. He's a limited participant in practice today, and he's considered day-to-day, so that's really good news. We just know the past 2 seasons he's dealt with that same shoulder, and he's missed like 2 to 3 games. So you just hope, from a fantasy perspective, there's some clarity. So either they rule him out and Madison gets the full workload, or Dalvin is ruled in and hopefully they give us some good coach talk to where he's going to get that full workload. You just hate from a fantasy perspective when it's really murky and Dalvin's active and you have to start him because he's Dalvin Cook, because you know what he can do even on a limited per touch basis. But then if he's out, it gives you some clarity for Madison owners. You're like, all right, let me just start Madison. He's going to have the full workload this week. So hopefully we get some clarity on that by tomorrow. Just really unfortunate that these injuries are happening to these first round picks really early on in the season. Another injury on the ground, Cordero Patterson. He was a DNP both yesterday and today. Again, really surprising. It's a knee injury. I wasn't really able to find much information on it, but keep an eye out for that. That's another interesting one. And then DeAndre Swift, man. He looked like he was having a super elite start to the season in week 1, got banged up in week 2 with the ankle injury. They gave him some rest, limited touches, and then week 3 he comes back, boom, shoulder injury, only gets like 7 touches in the game. They're saying he should be out until the bye week. Their bye week is week 6. He was a DNP both today and yesterday, so that's another really unfortunate injury. Jamal Williams owners are probably very happy about that. That's everything I have so far running back-wise. TJ Hawkinson, staying with Detroit, was a DNP yesterday with a foot injury, but he was a limited participant in practice today. He's been banged up. He was dealing with a hip injury last week, so he can't really catch a break. But hopefully he stays healthy, through the season. Michael Gallup, over to the Dallas Cowboys. He was a full participant in practice Wednesday and Thursday, so looks like he's finally ready to get back at it. I know Cooper Rush, Dak Prescott, they're very excited to get that weapon back. He looked really good last year. A lot of people thought they were going to lose him to free agency, but Jerry Jones signed that check. He gave him back. So Michael Gallup, if you're a Gallup owner, I know you've been waiting. I'd wait a while on him, give it a week, see how everything plays out, but I know Dallas should be really happy to have him back. He's a really good wide receiver too, next to CeeDee Lamb. And then staying with Dallas, Dalton Schultz. He was a full participant in practice today, so really good sign. He should be back ready and fired up, so that's really good. And then going over to Buffalo, I've got some really bad news. Gabe Davis, he was a limited participant in practice yesterday. However, today he was downgraded to an out. He was non-participant in practice. That's really bad news. You never want to see a player decline in their practice reports. And it's an ankle injury, so it's really sensitive. So to go from an LP to a DNP on a Thursday is really not a good sign. I know they have a crazy game versus Baltimore this week. So Gabe Davis owners, they're really, really salty right now. Hopefully we get in a practice report, a better one in tomorrow. But man, that's just some bad news right there. Can't really catch a break. And then moving over to New Orleans, both Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry are dealing with some injuries. Michael Thomas a bit more severe. He's dealing with a toe issue, and he was a DNP yesterday, and he was a DNP today. That report just came in. Like I said before, Michael Thomas and Jameis Winston, both DNPs back-to-back days, and they've got an early kickoff in London on Sunday. Not a really good sign. So owners should be definitely looking towards the waiver wire to pivot if they have them in those lineups. And then Jarvis Landry, he was a limited participant in practice. He was a DNP yesterday. He was dealing with an ankle injury, but he should be good to go. So you guys can fire him up if you really need to. And then the Tampa Bay Bucks, they had a limited participant for both Julio Jones and Chris Godwin. Julio's dealing with that knee. Godwin's dealing with that hamstring injury. I have not been able to find an updated report for Thursday's report. That should give us some really good signs on Julio and Godwin. Sometimes with hamstring injuries, they get re-aggravated during practice. Julio was downgraded to an out after a limited participant earlier last week. So it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. If I get a report on my phone during the show, I'll be sure to update you guys. So that's there. Sterling Shepard, really, really unfortunate injury, man. We saw it Monday night. I love him as a receiver. The league loves him. He's just a great guy all around. Torn ACL. He can't catch a break. Last year, he's dealing with another particular injury. A lot of people, I know Odell was really, really frustrated on Twitter calling out the Giants and their staff because they play on turf. And as we know, a turf field is really, really unfortunate and has a high correlation to these crazy knee injuries. On the injury, Sterling Shepard is literally just jogging. The ball's nowhere near him, so he's like not going full speed on his route or anything, and boom, his knee just buckles. So that really sucks. Honestly, I hate turf, so you can get into it as soon as I finish up this injury report, but it's just really unfortunate. I know in soccer across the pond in Europe, they never have to deal with turf injuries because all of their fields for soccer is really natural. All their fields are natural grass. I was reading into it why so many fields here in the United States have to deal with turf. And honestly, what I could find was that it came down to just money. Over there in Europe, they're not really worried about those other facilities being used for concerts or anything like that. Whereas here in the States, all of those fields, they're being used for concerts, they're being used for other events and stuff like that. And obviously having real grass is a bit of a money issue. It probably causes some disdain for the owners. So for them, the turf thing is probably more efficient for them. So it really sucks that in this billion-dollar league where these owners are worth so much money and these players are making so much money that they can't support the product to really put that natural grass in. So that really sucks. Prayers out for Sterling Shepard there. And then a kicker report right here, Harrison Butker. He was a limited participant in practice. He's considered a game time decision. So shouts out to our kickers out there, everybody who's a kicker listening. We got to give you guys a shout out. Hopefully he plays. They just dropped Amendola, so that's a good sign. But it's a game time decision, so we'll see about that. And then one last injury, doesn't really have to do fantasy relevant unless you have defensive players, but Myles Garrett, he was in a really, really crazy car accident yesterday, actually. He said he was trying to avoid an animal on the road, and he swerved the car, and he flipped multiple times. There's a video out on Twitter of him being interviewed after. The car is super banged up. His agent came out and said non-life-threatening injuries, which is really good. It's expected not to be long-term. So if he doesn't play this week, he should be back maybe next week or the week after. But that's really good news for the Cleveland Browns, really good news for us because we love Myles Garrett. He's an amazing football player, and we want nothing but the best for him. So prayers up to Myles Garrett. And that really wraps up these injury reports. Let me know if I missed anything, Austin.
No, I mean the only other ones are the limited participants in terms of Tua and Waddle, which their games tonight. So they've both been deemed active and they're going to play. So we'll see if those injuries limited them at all. But yeah, I mean to go back to your point of the whole turf thing. I mean it's awful. I played on turf, just a couple like ultimate frisbee games recently, and I can tell you afterwards that I just feel sore in my knees, even just like playing just like a rec game. It's pretty crazy. So it just seems like these injury lists are going to get longer and longer every week that we do this pod, which is really trash. Hopefully that starts to die down as the season goes on. But yeah, that's horrible. But I mean, other than that, we can get right into the Thursday night football game if you want to get it popping.
Yeah, for sure. We can. Miami Dolphins, they're visiting the Cincinnati Bengals this week. It is the Thursday night game of the week. We are very excited for us to be on prime time, get some national spotlight. The Bills Dolphins game was nationally spotlighted, but it was during that 1:00 game, so everything's always crazy. But when it's a Thursday night game, you can really laser focus on it. So I'm super excited. The over-under's at 48.5 points, and the Bengals are favored by 3.5 points. So over the quarterbacks, and then you can touch on the running backs, and then we can both tackle the wide receivers so we can split that up pretty evenly. Quarterback-wise, you are starting both quarterbacks this week, in my opinion. You have Tua Tungi. He's been an absolute stud so far. Last week, he's the quarterback 5 so far. Granted, it's because of that super banger week he had versus Baltimore. Last week was a really grinded out game versus Buffalo. Obviously, they have a really good defense. They have a really good pass rush. Granted, they were banged up corner-wise and stuff, but when it's a divisional game, it gets really rocky. But in my opinion, with the over-under, with the game script, I have a feeling it's going to be a pretty big shootout. If you have Tua, maybe not so much in a 10-quarterback league. Maybe if you're desperate and you're pivoting away from an injury or something, you can definitely start him. But if you're in a 12-quarterback league, I'd be starting Tua, no doubt. It's a really good matchup this week for him. And then on the other side of the ball, we got Joey B, man. Joey Cool Burrow, quarterback 9 so far. He finally had a bounce back week. Like I told you guys over and over again, calm down on the Joey B scarcity. Like everything's going to work out. He'll finally regress towards that mean in those beneficial matchups. He had 31 points last week. He threw the ball 36 times. He completed 23 of those attempts for 275 yards, and he had 3 touchdowns. So that's really good. It was a really good game versus the Jets. And I expect him to do the same thing this week versus Miami, unfortunately. I think he's going to have a really great game. I'm not looking forward to it as a Dolphins fan, but if you're a Joe Burrow owner, you're going to be very excited tonight in this primetime game. So yeah, I've got both quarterbacks. Joey B, I have him ranked higher than Tua this week, strictly because of his receivers and the matchup. I know the Dolphins, they've been a little bit banged up. As we saw the Bills, they were able to do some things. So I've got Joey B edging out Tua in this one, but I think that you can start both quarterbacks with confidence here.
Yeah, I'm hoping Tua does better than Joey B, just for the Finn's sake. On the ground, on the Dolphins side, it's looking like that it's really a true committee between Raheem Mostert and Chase Edmonds. Raheem Mostert is edging Chase Edmonds out a little bit on the ground carries wise, and then Edmonds is edging Raheem Mostert out on the target side. I personally like Chase Edmonds long term better than Raheem Mostert, just because I think he's he's a better player in my opinion. He just has more explosiveness. He's going to do better on the ground and through the air at the same time. So the upside there is better for Chase Edmonds, but I'm hesitant to start either of them this week. And it seems like moving forward, unless there's a big change in our coaching mindset, which I doubt, or there's an injury, God forbid, that you can't really start them, or they are just like a desperate flex play. On the other side, the Joe Mixon, he's had a slow start, but you have to play him every week. I know the Bengals want to get him going. He's a key player of their offense. And we just saw Devin Singletary go off for, catching touchdown and kind of go crazy on the Finns last week. So you're starting Joe Mixon 100% of the time. He's a really, really good athlete. He's a great football player. And I think he's going to pop out this game, even though I don't want him to.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I've had a feeling from the start, especially with McDaniel coming over from the 49ers, that this Dolphins backfield was going to be really muddy and murky fantasy-wise. from an NFL standpoint, he's doing exactly what he needs to do. He's calling the right player up when they need to for a pass play or for a screen or for a draw play. We don't run the ball much. Our run game's really not that good. Granted, we have a middle of the pack O-line this year. I have a feeling next year, hopefully we get like a super really good running back, maybe something like that. But for now, those running backs, it's a really murky situation. I prefer Edmonds, just like you do, just for the passing upside and stuff. But yeah, and then Joe Mixon, I think he's going to have a really good game this week as well. Going over to the receiver side of things through the air, I'll tackle the Cincinnati side, and I'll pass off to you the Dolphin side of that. On Cincinnati side, Jamar Chase, man. Sauce Gardner last week really gave him the clamps. He had 10 targets, only 6 receptions for 29 yards. He did have a touchdown, but if you're a Jamar Chase owner, definitely last week wasn't the week you were expecting from him. Jamar Chase should see a lot of Xavier Howard this week, so it's going to be really interesting to see how they match up. However, though, T. Higgins is on the opposite side of the field, and he is just as much of a threat as Jamar Chase. So if you're a Jamar Chase owner, you got to start him. You're rolling him out there as your wide receiver one. You got to be confident. You got to hope Joe Burrow and him just really force feed that ball. So you're starting him with confidence this week. And then T. Higgins, as I just brushed up on, to me, he's an absolute stud. He's in the top debate for that best wide receiver duo. He just really gets the ball. He gets some insane catches. He had a touchdown that to me was absolutely robbed last week. Tippy-tone in the end zone. Speaking of that, to me, this rule doesn't really make sense to me, to where if you get your tiptoes in the end zone and you catch the ball, it counts as a touchdown. But if you get your heels down and both your heels are down and the toes haven't landed yet, and you still have control of the ball, they rule it not a touchdown. So to me, that doesn't make sense, because how can your two toes be on and you have security of the ball be a touchdown?
Yeah.
But if your back heels are in and you have security of the ball, that can't be ruled a touchdown. To me, that's really weird. The NFL should really update that rule, because if you can get a super famous Super Bowl catch like the Steelers Cardinals was, and you count that, and then T. Higgins was robbed like that, to me, that's really unfortunate. But yeah, T. Higgins, you're absolutely starting him with confidence. He's that wide receiver 2 with wide receiver 1 upside. And then Tyler Boyd, man, really sneaky player last week. He did really good. He only had 5 targets, but he had 4 catches for 105 yards. And he had a touchdown. That touchdown came on one super really crazy long play. But if you're desperate, if you're in a 12-man or 14-man league, in a game like this, I wouldn't be mad at you for throwing Tyler Boyd out there. He's like a low-end wide receiver 3 flex play to me, but they have such a high-octane offense that, honestly, I wouldn't be mind starting him for the Bengals this week.
Yeah, I would agree that passing offense is starting to pick up the pace. So in good matchups, you could probably throw all 3 of them out there. On the Dolphins side, it's looking like the two mentas are going to just be the 2 mentas for the rest of the year. Outside of them, you're not really playing much. But, Tyreek Hill, he had a slow week last week. It was a really grinder game, and Waddle kind of popped out and took most of the load. But I think Tyreek is going to pop out and go crazy this week. I believe that you said something in the chat about how the Bengals play like the most man coverage of any team in the league. If you're showing Tyreek Hill man coverage, you're going to get blown over the top every time. I think you're playing Tyreek in this matchup, and not to mention, and Jalen Waddle's also a start. He's a god. Honestly, he's looking like second breakout. He's taking that step in his sophomore year. He's going to go crazy this year, but he was a little bit limited with the groin this week. So, he's been limited every week, and it really hasn't slowed him down much. I don't know if it's going to matter much this week either, but if he is slowed down at all, that means more pop out for Tyreek. But yeah, you're playing both of them. They're both stars. They're top 5 wide receivers in the league right now, or something like that, both of them. Yeah. So you got to play them. Their upside is just absolutely insane.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I really highly doubt the Bengals are going to stick with that man approach on defense with receivers like we have. I have a feeling we're going to see a lot of high safety looks, 2 safeties falling back. It'll be really interesting to see how they play that out. And then tight end wise, you're not starting anybody here. I know last week we were like, maybe there's some hope for Mike Gesicki. And then no, he had 1 target for 6 yards. He was only on the field for 40% snap rate. So Mike Gesicki, you can't really start him. On top of that, Durham Smythe he's decent. Like, he's not a bad tight end. He can make stuff happen. And then on the other side of the ball, Hayden Hurst, you're not looking into him either. So that really wraps up Thursday Night Football. I'm really excited. I know you are too as a Dolphins fan. I cannot wait for this game. I really hope that we can pull it out and go 4-0, man. It'll be a crazy, crazy sight. Miami, I have a feeling the Twitter and all that stuff is going to absolutely explode. So yeah, I'm really excited for this game here. And with that being said, let's transition out of the Thursday night game. And then I'll start off with the first 1 p.m. game that I have assigned to me. And that's going to be the Seattle Seahawks visiting the Detroit Lions this week. Another over under 48.5, and the Lions are the favorite. They are -4 in this matchup. This is a super exciting game to me. Through the air, I'm not really starting any of these quarterbacks. Once again, Geno Smith, not really looking at him. And then Jared Goff. He's got a high-octane offense, but it's just really so unpredictable there that I'm not really going to start any of those guys. But then on the ground, it gets really interesting. Rashad Penny, RB48 through 3 weeks. I don't really have him highly ranked this week, but I'm saying it here first. I think this might be a potential breakout game for Rashad Penny. He looked really good last week. He had 14 for 66 on the ground, and he's averaging 4.7 yards a carry. So that's really great. Everything I've seen, whenever he's given that opportunity to have the ball, he looks really good. He passes the eye test. I know they got Kenneth Walker there, so that's a bit annoying. But Rashad Penny, he looks really, really good, and Detroit ranks 27th versus the rush. So I don't like him as a play this week. If you're really desperate, RB3 maybe. But yeah, I think there's some potential there if Pete Carroll gets it right and his brains aren't gushed, if they feed him the ball, that we might have a Rashad Penny breakout game that some of his owners have been looking forward to. And then staying on the ground, obviously DeAndre Swift, he's probably not going to play this week. Jamal Williams, RB7 through 3 weeks, man. It's just really crazy. Obviously, it has to do with the injuries that have been going on with DeAndre Swift, the murkiness with the ankle, and then he had to deal with the shoulder injury. But man, he had 20 touches for 87 and 2 TDs last week. So that's really, really good sign. On top of that, Craig Reynolds is dealing with a DNP yesterday and today. So Jamal Williams should have a really good week. And then the cherry on top, 31st ranked defense, no Swift. I really love him as a really good play this week. And then going through the air, DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. DK Metcalf, wide receiver 43. He finally had a touchdown last week. Nothing too crazy, but he did have 12 targets. So that's a really good sign. And then they're the 25th ranked passing defense. So Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, you're going to like both of them this week. Excuse me. And then on the other side of things, Amon Ra, wide receiver 3 through 3 weeks. Really banger start. He's a wide receiver 1. You're going to start him with no hesitation. He got banged up with the ankle injury, but he looks fine so far. And then tight end wise, you're just really going to be starting TJ Hawkinson here. He finally had a touchdown last week. And then some good news. Seattle's a really good matchup for tight ends. Kyle Pitts went 5 for 87 last week, and then both San Fran and Denver in week 1 and week 2 had touchdowns through their tight ends. So that's a really good sign over there.
Yeah, that game will be interesting. I think the Lions are looking up, and I don't know. I think they might put a beat down on the Seahawks. So I'll move over to an interesting game. This is the Vikings versus the Saints. This is actually a 9:30 a.m. game over in London, across the pond. 43.5 is the over-under, so pretty low over-under. These London games are always so weird. I know I'm going to wake up with crust in my eyeballs and throw on a stream and watch the game. But is Justin Jefferson going to bounce back? I really hope so. I know the coach that came out and said the past 2 weeks they've just been bad with him. They want to move him around more. They need to get back to what they did in week 1 where he torched the Packers. So hopefully he bounces back. And then, with those injuries to MT and to Michael Thomas and Jarvis, Olave might be a pop out. This might be the week that we really get to see him dominate. So on the quarterback side, you're really probably only starting Kirk Cousins, and Kirk Cousins is starting to fall out of my top 10 to 12. He's really been lackluster the past couple weeks. Even when they score 26 points, he kind of doesn't really get it done much. He's like a 20-point a game guy, and with downside, honestly, less upside. So you're probably only playing him. And Jameis Winston with the back, I mean, he's been throwing picks. He's got the back injury. I don't know. You're probably not starting him. Running back wise, it's very interesting. Similar things on both sides of the ball. with Dalvin Cook and Alvin Kamara. Dalvin Cook, if he plays, you got to play him. It's Dalvin Cook. You took him with a really high draft pick. But if he doesn't play, Alexander Mattison is a must start. The guy goes off every single game he plays, and he's going to have just such a high volume in that offense. He's going to get every touch, every pass out of the backfield, really. Mike Boone is there or whatever, but you're not going to, whatever. He's not going to get the job done. And then on the other side of the ball, it's very similar with Alvin Kamara. I think Alvin Kamara is set to play. He played last week off the rib injury. He wasn't really efficient, but if he plays, you got to play him 100% of the time. He has the upside of any stud player in the league. But if he doesn't play, Mark Ingram hasn't put out the output of a high premium handcuff like you want, but he has been solid. He's got, decent amount of points, and he's going to be so involved in that backfield that you just got to throw him into your lineups, just even if it's just a flex. And then for wide receivers, Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen are both starts for me. Adam Thielen kind of popped out a little bit last week. Justin Jefferson was completely locked down. He's just getting double teamed. And it looks like Thielen is benefiting from that. So Thielen is looking like a nice wide receiver 3 or flex, but you're playing him. And then KJ Osborne, he's kind of popping out too a little bit. He's much more relevant in deeper leagues, or dynasty leagues, but not much relevance in our 10-man. On the New Orleans side of the ball, like I said, Olave, this might be the week, man. If MT doesn't go, and maybe even Jarvis doesn't go or is limited or whatever, Olave might see 15, 20 targets in this game and just absolutely have a monster week if he can get open and Jameis can get him the ball. If Michael Thomas plays, which it's looking like he's not going to play. If he does play, you play him. Same with Jarvis. They're both solid. I mean, Michael Thomas was looking like a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. And Jarvis is looking like a solid flex or fringe wide receiver 2 player. But if they're Olave is a huge play. And then on the tight end side of the ball, there's not really much to say about them. Irv Smith, bum, drops the ball every week. can't get involved. He pops out. I thought he was going to be really solid. He's a great athlete. He had high hopes coming out of college and whatnot. But until he proves that he can be consistent, you can't really play him. And yeah, this game, 43.5. It's a low. It's going to be a low-scoring game.
Yeah, for sure. This is one of those games that's like there's not really much clarity on it. Jameis Winston being out could affect the receivers, could affect Kamara. And then on the other side of the ball, Dalvin Cook, we don't know what's going to happen with him and Madison. So this is one of those games that you really need to pay attention to if you have stocks in any of these players, because we really don't know what's going to happen. So that should be an interesting game over there in London. KJ Osborne, he's a sneaky DFS play this week. His percentages have gone up. He's 70-75% range every week. So if you're into DraftKings and all that stuff like that, could be a little sneaky play there. So I like that little tidbit that you gave. Transitioning over to a stinky off, we have the Chicago Bears visiting the New York Giants. The over-under 39.5, and the Bears are +3 in this one. There's not really anybody you're starting here in the air or quarterback-wise. Daniel Jones, Justin Fields, I'm not on any of them. Justin Fields doesn't even throw the ball. And then Daniel Jones, he's just too inconsistent. His line sucks, so he's getting sacked all the time, putting them in bad positions. So I'm off both those quarterbacks. And then on the ground, Saquon Barkley, running back 1 through 3 weeks. I think he's going to absolutely pop off this week. I have him as my running back 2. He's got a 92% snap rate. He went for 14 for 81 in a TD last week. He's averaging almost 6 yards per carry. 4 for 45 on the ground, and the Bears rank 30th in the rushing game. So I think Saquon Barkley's an absolute nuclear spot this week. So if you're a Barkley owner, you're happy. All right, and then going on towards the Chicago side of the ground game, it's really murky over there. Like I said before, David Montgomery in the injury report, he was a DNP yesterday and a DNP today. It doesn't look like he's going to play, but the coach is being really weird with the talk. So if he's out, I think you're absolutely firing up Khalil Herbert. The Giants are ranked 25th versus the rush, so the matchup is really good. And then on Sunday, we saw him. He rushed 20 rushes for 157 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's averaging over 7 yards per carry when he does get those opportunities. So I think Khalil Herbert is an absolute smash this week if DeMont's out, and he's worth a flex spot or maybe even an RB2 if you need him to. And then on the passing side of things, I'm not starting anybody on either side of the field. On the Chicago side of things, Darnell Mooney, Nope, non-existent. Justin Fields doesn't even really throw the ball there. So it's just really ugly. And then on the Giants side of things, we just lost Sterling Shepard. And then the best thing they have is Richie James. Kenny Golladay can't catch a pass. So just over there, I'm just out on everybody through the air. Wide receivers, tight ends. The only thing I'm interested in here is the ground game. Saquon Barkley, obviously an auto smash. And then if Khalil Herbert can be a full go, get that full workload, I'm really, really confident that he's going to have a good game this week. So that really wraps up that game. Not really too fantasy relevant here.
Yeah, that game's going to be my weekly super pooper scooper game. But we'll move it over to an interesting game, actually. That's the Falcons versus the Browns. And this game is 49.5 point over under, which is interesting because I was having a hard time finding something to say about this game, honestly. But these teams both have surprisingly solid offenses for what they're working with. With Brissett and Mariota and whatever. I think it's going to come down to who can be the better quarterback out of the two, just because, they're both whatever quarterbacks. So whoever can play better is going to determine this game. You're not really playing either of the quarterbacks in any fantasy leagues pretty much, unless it's like super deep. With Mariota and Brissett, they're just not playable. Mariota has like sneaky rushing upside, but only in deeper leagues. And Brisket, we know he's meat. And then in terms of on the ground, we said it. Cordero Patterson has missed the past 2 days. They're calling them veteran rest days, but they did say something about his knee. I'm expecting him to play. He looked insane last week. He rushed for like 140 yards or something. He had like 153 total yards. He looked absurd. They obviously want to use him, and I think that he's kind of at that point in his career where he's going to get those Wednesday rest days pretty much every week. So you're playing him, and you're not really playing anybody behind him unless something happens to him. On the Cleveland side of the ball, I mean, Nick Chubb is just an absolute superstar stud every single week. You have to play him. He's going to rush for it seems like over 100 yards, and now he's getting in the end zone a bunch. So you have to play him. And then Kareem Hunt, he's always kind of that player where you're like, I could probably throw him in. He'll probably get some catches. He's going to have 10, 11 touches on the ground, maybe get in the end zone. He's very efficient. He's extremely good at football. He's a great running back. So you kind of just have to throw him in your lineup too if he's kind of one of your flex plays. He's definitely a solid flex play. Through the air, we got some solid players who we didn't, around draft time, we didn't know whether these players were going to pop out and be solid or not. They were kind of in those, mid round. On Atlanta side of the ball, we have Drake London, obviously my MENTA of the week. He didn't pop off explosion like I wanted him to, but he did get in the end zone. He played really well. That game was kind of weak, but he did end up getting in the end zone, and I think he's going to have a solid game again this week. Behind him, there's not really much to say about talent except for Kyle Pitts, who did end up popping out last week and shows us that he is a player that is going to be able to be played week in and week out. I think moving forward, their coach is not going to not allow them to throw the ball to Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts is an absolute stud specimen. They're going to get him involved. They have to get him involved if they want to win. So yeah, I think Kyle Pitts, you're playing him as well. And then on the Cleveland side of the ball, Amari had his pop out game, his breakout game for the Browns. He went for over 100 and a touchdown on prime time. It seems like that Steelers defense is just trash, but we can get into that later. But you're playing Amari for sure. And then, behind him, it's very murky. Donovan People-Jones he's really fringe flex even. But tight end David Njoku looked like a prime Gronkowski out there last week. He was going absolutely crazy. It seemed like 5 passes in a row, the ball was thrown to him. He was unstoppable. I mean, what we wanted from him out of Miami. So, if he can keep that up and Brissett can get a good connection going with him, I think moving forward, he may be a top 5 play if they keep throwing the ball to him. They're a run heavy offense, so don't be too excited about it, but he definitely is looking like he's coming into form. But yeah, that game is going to be interesting. 49.5. There should be some points there.
Yeah, and Njoku could be an anomaly. We'll see. Jacoby Brisket, he's a game manager, so if the defense is going to give you those underneath routes, he's going to keep targeting it. So that was a really big flaw on the Steelers last week. But then, hey, man, if you guys listen to the podcast, I covered the Atlanta game last week. I told you guys Seattle is vulnerable to the tight end position, just like I got finished talking about TJ Hawkinson, and we saw it. Kyle Pitts was able to go 5 for 87. He didn't get a touchdown. He got really close. I want to say he got tackled within like the 2-3 yard line on a play. But yeah, Kyle Pitts, man, he's back. Matchup varied, but yeah, that should be a decent game. I'm not too excited about it. It'll be on cable for me. As you guys know, I live here in Atlanta. So yeah, that's that. Going into another game now, this is a really exciting game, which in the beginning of the season, you wouldn't think was that too exciting, was the Jaguars are coming to visit the Philadelphia Eagles with an over-under of 46, and the Eagles being favored by 6.5 points. Jalen Hurts, really nothing to say on him. He's an absolute monster. He's the QB3 through 3 weeks. I have him as my quarterback 2 this week. Back-to-back games of over 300 passing yards. As many of you know, we had doubts coming into the season on his passing ability. We never doubted the rushing. He was an absolute monster in that field in college with Alabama. But man, that passing game just looks absolutely electric right now. A.J. Brown's been a huge help for them. Devonta Smith is finally coming into form, that Heisman candidate that we all saw. So yeah, you got to love it. And he's averaging 9 rushing attempts per game. His over-under rushing yards is 46.5. So that upside is just absolutely incredible. You got to love it. And then Trevor Lawrence, man, sneaky play. He's been the quarterback 10 through 3 weeks. So if you were somebody you drafted like a Brady or a Rodgers or a Stafford, hoping that they'd be that guy, Trevor Lawrence is outperforming him so far, man. It's not that good of a matchup this week. But he was worth a mention. The D-line is very elite in Philadelphia. As we saw last week, they were able to muster up 9 sacks versus the Washington Commanders. So that's pretty scary. However, with the Eagles being as high octane as they are, it should be a positive game script for T-Law to really get it going, and that passing volume should be high. So I like T-Law this week too. If you're in a 12 quarterback league especially, I'd be starting him no doubt. And then transitioning over to the ground game, James Robinson, man. Running back 3 so far in the season. Ray, I'm looking at you, my friend. You're the number one believer of him. I know you can't give enough flowers to J-Rob. It's been crazy so far what we've seen. It's just, I don't even know. He really leaves me speechless after going through that devastating injury that he had. The volume's been there. He's averaging over 16 touches a week the last 2 weeks, and that's what's really important. In the beginning, it didn't look like he was going to do too much with those touches. The yards per carry were low. But last week, granted, it is a little bit swayed by that huge run that he had on a 4th and 1 that he bounced to the outside. But the cut looked good. I know you didn't give it too much credit on that run when we were debating some ETN, J-Rob stuff. But hey, man, the numbers don't lie. Men lie, women lie, but numbers don't. He's a high upside RB2 for me going forward as of now. And then Travis Etienne, it's just been really unfortunate so far. We really thought he was going to be that super high PPR guy, have that chemistry with T-Law, but it hasn't worked out so far. J-Rob obviously has the upper hand with the experience in the NFL, and we thought that the Jaguars are going to really fall behind in games quickly. However, their defense has been competent, their offense has been competent, so they're staying in these games where J-Rob in between the tackles is a prime beneficiary for them. But I have a feeling towards the end of the season, towards middle of the season, ETN should carve out more of a role. His targets just aren't there so far. He's only gotten 4 targets, 3 targets, and then 3 targets last week again. So you really, if you're an ETN owner, you want to see an uptick in that severely in the upcoming weeks. Because if not, he's just going to be that RB3, maybe flex play if you need him to. So yeah, that's really unfortunate there. But I wouldn't hold out hope. Definitely don't drop him, especially if you're in a keeper league or anything like that. Just hold out. Hopefully J-Rob will come back to earth a little bit touch-wise, and then ETN can start to get it going there. And then on the Philly side of things, Miles Sanders, that's really all I'm going to get into on that Philly side of the ball. You're not starting Gainwell or Boston Scott. Sanders is the clear RB1 there, but there's not a lot of upside, especially because Jalen Hurts, being that the rushing quarterback that he is, Philly is gladly going to give him the goal line red zone touches over a Miles Sanders any day of the week, because Hurts' frame is just so massive that you just got to give him the ball. In this game, you're just really hoping for a TD from Sanders. He's going to get 12 to 18 touches a game, which is what you want from an RB2. but he's really touchdown dependent to have one of those really, really good games like we saw in week 1. So if you have him, in my opinion, you're going to be starting him running back 2. Low end, though, not a high end. Low end running back 2 there. And then through the air, Christian Kirk. Absolute league winner so far. He's the wide receiver 6. He continues, in my opinion, to be the steal of the draft so far. He's got a 90% snap rate. He's the clear wide receiver 1 on the team. Last week he had 6 for 72 and a TD on 9 targets. So I really love Christian Kirk. I know you were high on him, and I know every time you see him do big things, you're going to be happy. And then honorable mention, I'm not really going to get too much into him, but Zay Jones. Zay Jones, week 1 got 11 targets, and then last week he got 10 targets. He got a touchdown. He's clearly, to me, outgained Marvin Jones in that wide receiver 2 role. I think Zay Jones surpassed him. So he's definitely an eye out there. If you're in a 12-man league and you're desperate, I would consider Zay Jones in a pretty high shootout, positive game script game. So he's just an honorable mention for me. And then the Philly side of the ball, A.J. Brown, wide receiver 7 so far. I have him as a top 10 play this week. Not really much to say on him. He's a stud. He's a specimen. I know last week you gave that where he's like one of the only receivers who has like a super high rate on the number 1 read. So anytime Jalen Hurts hikes that ball, he's looking towards A.J. Brown right away. So you're starting him with confidence this week. Should be a decent matchup now that Jacksonville is pretty competent. And then Devonta Smith had his coming out party last week. Absolutely monstered game. He had 12 targets, 8 catches for 169 and a touch. He's finally looking like that 1B receiver to that 1A. Man, welcome to the NFL, my friend. We've been waiting on this for all last season. We were like, all right, where is he at? Where's he at? But A.J. Brown, it just really shows how much a positive factor on a team and fantasy-wise, having that super alpha receiver on your team, dragging away the coverages, dragging away the attention. So yeah, Devonta Smith, man, I'm really, really happy. I love him as a player, and I'm happy to see him do big things. He's now in that wide receiver 2 range, maybe wide receiver 3 if he comes back down to earth. But as of right now, you got to start him as a wide receiver 2. Sevilla has him on his freaking bench. He's got a Monreal St. Brown, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, and then Smitty's just on his bench. So Sevilla's just spoils galore there. So it'll be interesting to see if he starts him this week. And I saw an interesting thing on NFL Today yesterday. They were debating who they thought were the top wide receivers in the league duo-wise were. And they ranked A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith as the top wide receiver duo in the league. And then they had Jalen Waddle and Tyreek as the 2. I think it's a little biased because Devonta Smith finally had that crazy game last week. But to me, Devonta Smith, A.J. Brown, you're just going to start them both. Really, really good. And then through the air, Dallas Goedert, he got banged up last week. To me, now that Devonta Smith is having that breakout, he falls to 3rd in the pecking order. And tight end's a landscape. It's a desolate landscape there, man. If you don't have Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews, you're really just going to be hoping for that touchdown. And Dallas Goedert didn't get a touchdown last week, but he was highly targeted. And then last week he wasn't really targeted because A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith were able to do their thing. So Goedert, he's a solid play this week, top 8 play to me, but you're just really hoping for that touchdown.
Yeah, I'll say 2 things. One is that I do like what you're saying about Zay Jones, but interesting. He practiced Wednesday, did not practice today, popped up with an ankle injury. Really concerning to see that. You never want to see that, like you said, you never want to see that downgrade. That's really, really unfortunate for him. And if he can't go, you know, he had a smash game last week. Trevor likes throwing the ball to him. That's really sad. I actually forgot what I was going to say for the other one. So, but yeah, that game's going to be really good. It seems like the Jaguars are really going to be able to compete. Their defense actually looks really, really solid. So we'll see how that progresses through the rest of the year. And then we'll move from that game to another game that, you know, I told Rosie in the beginning or before we did this podcast, I got just stuck with some duty games, man, just some stinkies. But I got the Titans versus the Colts. This game has a 42.5 over under, so another low scoring game. I called this game the game of the box stackers because there's very, very little going on through the air, and we're going to see 8-man box stacks for Jonathan Taylor and for Derrick Henry pretty much the entire game. But the one thing that I think we could look out for is potentially a Treylon Burks breakout. So it'll be interesting to see how that works. Is this the week? Who knows? I know their coach was saying they want to get him the ball. They want to get him involved. You sent it in the chat. You know, you're hype about it. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Through the air, you can't really start Matt Ryan or Ryan Tannehill with confidence. Matt Ryan was looking like the guy, you know, in the offseason, but you just can't start him anyways. And it's just so disappointing. These guys are just vets now. They get 15 points a game. They got trash passing offenses. So I don't know. We'll see if the Colts can maybe pick it back up, but I'm hesitant to start either of them. On the ground, I mean, it's just 2 top 5 picks: Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor. Like, you play them. Like, you just play them no matter what. Like, they're gonna get the box stacked against them, but who cares? Like, they're gonna break out a run at some point. Through the air, it's really interesting. These two teams are very similar. They have a really stud running back, and then they have one kind of guy in the pass game, and everything else behind that is kind of sketchy. On the Colts side of the ball, Michael Pittman, he came back from the quad and he showed out again. He's definitely Matt Ryan's favorite target, and he's going to be a weekly wide receiver 2 with wide receiver 1 upside every single week for sure. And then, like I said, on Tennessee side of the ball, Treylon Burks is going to be the guy there. I think they really like his game. He's showing that he has very, very elite skill. He has like top yards per route run of any rookie right now, which is crazy with some of the talent on the rookie side of the ball. So if they start feeding him and Ryan Tannehill can get on a good page with him, I think he's going to pop out. Behind them, it's just desolate, man. It's like you can't start Alec Pierce, you can't start Ashton Doolin, you can't start Paris Campbell. Robert Woods is just like, I feel like I see him catch the ball. It seems like a good catch. I'm like, oh, is Robert Woods going to do like sick this week? And then like he just kind of does. So I don't know. There's not really much to say, and especially even the tight end, like. Did Matt Ryan throw the ball to Mo Alley Cox, or was it somebody different for touchdowns?
Yeah.
Like, I just couldn't. It was just unbelievable. Just tight ends are just desolate, and when you have a team that doesn't have a solid tight end 1, you just can't play them. So sure. I expect this game to be no bueno.
Just real quick, pour one out for my dog Bobby Trees, man. He's getting up. He's getting up in age. He had that ACL injury. It sucks. He's one of my favorite players in the league, so that really sucks. But I do love that little Treylon Burks tidbit that you gave there. Honestly, I feel like I might have gotten a little bit of a finesse getting him off the waiver wire.
Man.
In week 3, V was dropping him, picking him up. He's like the harlot of our league so far. Poor Treylon Burks being tossed around like a groupie. But Tennessee was down. Their game scripts were really bad first 2 weeks, so it could have been an anomaly. As the season goes on, they could get into their offense more. So Treylon Burks, I'm really excited about that. We'll see if this is the week. So yeah, that's that. And apologies, I will try to break up the game set, the more evenly distribute the quality of games next week. This week I was kind of in a rush. I was doing some stuff, so I just distributed the games really quickly.
This week has bad games across the board. Like last week was fun. This week is not.
Yeah, the games just this week aren't even that good to begin with. But going into a super, super elite game, we have the Buffalo Bills, who are 2-1 because of us, visiting Baltimore, B-More, and they are visiting Lamar Jackson with an over-under of 51, and the Buffalo Bills are favored by 3 points here, which is really interesting because the Ravens are a home dog here. And as a betting man, you love home dogs. Sometimes you got to play them because you got to take advantage of that. Quarterback-wise, I really do not have enough flowers to give both of these guys. We got Josh Allen as the QB2. We got Lamar as the QB1 so far through 3 weeks. These guys are just absolute gems. Josh Allen, you paid up a little bit more. You might have paid up 2 rounds more than Lamar, so Lamar's value-wise is better right now. But both of these quarterbacks, they're just absolutely unbelievable guys. Josh, granted, they just don't have a run game there. They don't like to run the ball. So he's throwing the ball like 60 times a game. And with his talent, that's just the upside is immense. And then Lamar, Baltimore, surprisingly, doesn't really have an established run game right now. And then he has that elite rushing upside of being an RB1. So really not much to say about him. You're starting both with confidence there. And then going through the ground, it's really murky on both sides of the ball. As I just mentioned, the run game there is not too good. Devin Singletary, he's the running back 1 there for sure. James Cook was able to get involved in the passing game. He had some little bright spots there. Zach Moss, he had one big little scamper last week, but Devin Singletary, he's the RB1 there. But there's really not much to go about it there. He has no more than 10 rushes in a game. The only beneficiary there is that he's on a high-octane offense. So if they get in that red zone, maybe they'll give him the ball. But then you got to worry about Josh Allen being that big-frame quarterback and him just sneaking the ball in there. The one bright spot in last week's game, he had 11 targets. He turned that in for 9 catches and 78 yards and a TD. So it's really interesting. I wrote down a note here. To me, it's interesting the way that Miami was able to defend Josh Allen. I know there was just a segment that Boyer, he had a clip that they were sidelined, and he said about Buffalo to the defense during the game, they don't want to play like this. They don't want to play dink and dives. They want to go for the big play all the time. So if more teams around the league take notes about how Miami defended Josh Allen and them last week, maybe that'll be beneficial to Devin Singletary. Maybe Josh Allen will have to settle more for these dinks and these dives where Devin Singletary can do these out routes. So maybe it'll be beneficiary towards him in the long run. But as I said, you're not really starting him. He's an RB3 at best with high upside because of the offense there. And then running back wise on the ground, I didn't even write anything down. J.K. Dobbins, he had his first week back. He looked decent. Like I said last week, you're going to rest him. You don't know what the workload's going to be like. So on the ground there, Lamar's going to be your RB1. And then through the air on that side of things, Stephon Diggs, he's my wide receiver 2 this week. He is an absolutely nuclear matchup. Baltimore is getting torched through the air. They're the 32nd ranked pass defense in the league. I think he's going to be a nuclear play. I was really debating who was I going to have on my wide receiver 1 this week, Cooper Kupp or Stephon Diggs. Cooper Kupp edged him just because he's a freaking monster. But yeah, man, Stephon Diggs, if you're an owner of him, I think he's going to be a week winner for you if you are in a really tight matchup and you don't know who's going to squeak it out. If you have Diggs on your lineup, I'm probably going to side with you because I think the matchup is just too good to pass up. And the targets are there. For Stephon Diggs, after 2 weeks, you're considering that a bad game, and he had 7 for 74, and he was dealing with cramps. So Stephon Diggs, he's one of my favorite players in the league, probably top 3, so you got to be starting him with confidence. And then on the other side of the ball, I really can't get into – I wrote down stuff, and then Gabe Davis' practice injury report came out. He was a DNP with the ankle. If you're a Gabe Davis owner so far, you're not happy with the production. You were taking him in the 5th round. I know week 2, he had that injury. I had him as my MENTA of the week. I really thought he was going to do big things. We saw Diggs get 3 touchdowns, over 104 receiving yards. So I really thought that was going to be the play for him, but now he's dealing with an injury. It just really sucks because we saw what he did in that AFC Championship game last year. He had, 6 touchdowns or something? So if you're a Gabe Davis owner, you just can't catch a break right now. So as of now, if you have him, just pay attention to that injury report. I'd probably be benching him if he's a DNP next week. But if he does play, like I said, Baltimore's been getting torched. So if he's a go out there, you got to put him in your lineups. To me, he's a high wide receiver 2 with upside with his banger, juicy matchup. I think that Josh Allen is really going to show no mercy to Baltimore, especially after that loss last week. I really think Buffalo is going to be crazy. So Dawson Knox, I didn't really write too much about him as well, but with that matchup and Baltimore being really penetrable, he could be a start this week. And then through the air on Baltimore side of things, Mark Andrews, he is a Mac Daddy type of guy. Tight end 1, I wrote a question down in my notes. Do we have a new tight end 1 for the season? Is he going to surpass Travis Kelce? That's going to be really interesting to see. Last week showed it. He had 13 targets, which is fucking absurd. I cannot believe he had that. So yeah, Mark Andrews, you're plugging him in your lineup, no hesitation. Every week it haunts me that I took DJ Moore over him in a league. I'll never let myself live that down. And then through the air, wide receiver-wise, Rashad Bateman, wide receiver 30 through 3 weeks. So where we got him is kind of where he's averaging out right now, but that's not what Rashad Bateman truthers wanted. Rashad Bateman owners thought that he was going to do really big things, and he's able to do them when he gets the touches. He gets super crazy catches. Last week, he had a bomb throw again that went for 45 yards, and that kind of saved his game. But the targets just aren't there. He had 4 targets last game. He only had 2 catches for 59 yards. he has the elite big playability, like I just mentioned, but other than that, there's just nothing too really happy to say about him. I love him as a player. I just hope that he can turn it around. So that really wraps up that game.
Yeah, it's interesting. We were both kind of high on Rashad Bateman, but his targets, it's just so weird. He's outplaying his volume by a ton. So I hope that that isn't the case. I hope he kind of sees more volume and then I don't know, pops out. But that game's going to be insane. I'm excited for that game. I'm definitely going to be having eyes on that game, especially with how the rest of this week is looking. All right, and you know what? We'll get into another. I was really, really excited for this game. It's the Jets versus the Steelers, but it's just looking like it's going to be trash. It's 40.5 point over under. The reason why I was excited is because the Steelers secondary has looked absolutely dog through the past 3 weeks. And I was really hoping that Garrett Wilson would go out and have an explosive game, but Zach Wilson is back. Wah, wah. And we know he loves Elijah Moore, kind of. Who knows? Maybe he'll love Garrett Wilson. But the other thing is that all the Elijah Moore truthers are like, oh, the only reason Elijah Moore is in a top 10 wide receiver is because of Zach Wilson. And then now that Zach Wilson's back and they have Garrett Wilson, they're like, oh, now that Zach Wilson's back, Elijah Moore is a top 10 wide receiver. Like, bro, what do you mean? Maybe Garrett Wilson is just the guy. But this game is horrible, man. Can we trust Zach Wilson? I don't know. You're not starting him at quarterback, that's for sure. Definitely not. And you're not starting Mitchell Trubisky. If it's him, I don't know, maybe we'll see Kenny Pickett out there soon, but you're not starting either of them soon unless Kenny Pickett comes out and starts being a stud. So you're not starting them this week, that's for sure. On the ground, you're starting Najee Harris. He has looked absolutely abysmal because of their line, because of their offensive efficiency. He has looked terrible, but he gets 1 billion touches a game, so you got to play him. He can pop off. He can get in the end zone at some point. So you got to play him. He's a great player. He's just on a terrible offense. He was dealing with the injury. If he goes down, Jaylen Warren, we'll talk about that if that happens. On the Jets side of the ball, it's really getting interesting. It's looking like it's a really, really true 50-50 committee. Michael Carter is a great football player. Breece Hall is a great football player. They're both good football players on another terrible offense. Good offense, QB away, I should say. But now it's starting to get to the point where you don't really know which one to start, especially even in like the flex position. Michael Carter had a good game, and then Breece Hall had a good game, and one was getting more touches on the ground, and then the other was getting more targets, and now they flip-flopped, and one's getting more targets, and the other one's getting more touches on the ground. It's very weird. They're both very good. And I think Breece Hall over time is going to overtake that job and see more of a workload. He's just absolutely disgusting on the ground. He looks like he's almost unstoppable. And he had 11 targets last week. So like Michael Carter's like, I don't even know, 1 or something. It's very interesting. I can't be confident starting either of them currently, but as the season moves on, maybe we see Breece Hall kind of take over in that backfield. Through the air, we're seeing, this is a very interesting stat. These are great wide receiver talents on just such awful passing offense teams. But there's only, I believe it's only 2 players in the league that have double-digit targets in every game this year. And it's CeeDee Lamb, and the other is Deontay Johnson. And they're both, and we won't talk about CeeDee Lamb right now, but him and Deontay Johnson are both outside the wide receiver 25 in terms of fantasy points per game. So the volume that everybody was hoping for with Deontay Johnson doesn't seem like it matters at all. The volume is so bad because of the quarterback play that you just can't really trust him. You got to play him. He can have a solid game, and he has had solid games, and he does have upside, but it's so limited in this passing offense. And then behind him, Chase Claypool, man, he's just a nobody, man. George Pickens had that OBJ mental catch, and he looks like he's going to overtake that Chase Claypool role and kind of become that wide receiver too. We talk about it every week. George Pickens is the guy. He's the guy. He's the guy. We may see it, but not for the foreseeable future with the quarterback play. Now on the Jets side of the ball, it's just 2 super studs. You have Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore. I mean, if Elijah Moore is going to see more targets, it's starting this week moving forward because of Zach Wilson. But I'm telling you, man, Garrett Wilson is a cheat code. That guy is just absolutely unstoppable at the wide receiver position. And so if Zach Wilson sees what Joe Flacco was seeing out of Garrett Wilson, I think Garrett Wilson is going to continue. He's going to continue to get the lion's share there. So you could probably, you're starting Garrett Wilson. And you could probably start Elijah Moore. Like I said, Pittsburgh's secondary is so bad, but like I'm personally sitting Garrett Wilson, even though I love him, just because I don't know what the situation is with Zach Wilson. Like you could probably start them if you have to, because it's a good matchup, and the volume is there. But man, if Zach Wilson is any worse than Joe Flacco and he doesn't throw the ball nearly as much, it's going to be so bad for the rest of the year. I'm going to be very disappointed. And then on the tight end side of the ball, interesting. Tyler Conklin is a top 5 tight end, man. That guy has seen immaculate volume. He has seen immaculate snap share. He's had over 10 points a game every single game. He is being funneled to the ball by Joe Flacco. So if Zach Wilson finds the connection that Joe Flacco saw with Tyler Conklin, and Tyler Conklin was kind of a guy I was looking at in the offseason. I know that in preseason, I'm pretty sure him and Wilson had a little connection. So if that picks up and we see that, Tyler Conklin moving forward is going to be a stud, man. He really can get you a solid 10 to 15 points every single week. He's in on every play. The Jets love to scheme their tight end in, so he's definitely a play. But yeah, this game, I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe the Steelers pick it up finally on a Zach Wilson start, but Steelers have looked bad on offense, so who knows? Maybe it'll be fool's gold.
Yeah, for sure. Tyler Conklin, I was sleeping on him. He wasn't even on my radar. And as soon as you mentioned his name, I went to his little profile, and his numbers are incredible for a tight end. Like, Jesus Christ, I'm actually shocked.
I played him in our dynasty league. Yeah, he's a tight end 4, 16 points last week, 8 for 8 and 84.
Yeah,
crazy.
I'm interested to see how the transition goes. Obviously, with the new quarterback under the helm, but I'm going to keep an eye out to see how he performs this week versus Pittsburgh. Yeah. So that's really interesting. And then on top of that, I wanted to talk about Garrett Wilson. He looked like he was going to go off last week, and then he had that super bad rib tackle that happened on him. Thankfully, he's okay. He's healthy. But dang, it sucks when first, second quarter of the game, they're going off already 5 for 60. You're like, oh my God, he's going to have another banger, and then he gets hurt. Really unfortunate there. I don't know if you mentioned Pat Freiermuth, but he's another solid start there at tight end. He's just one of those guys where you just hope for that tight end touchdown in the red zone because Mitch really likes him. But yeah, so both those tight ends are in play this week, especially if you're in a landscape that's as desolate as this. If you don't have a Mandrews or Kelsey,
I completely forgot about Pat Freiermuth because Mitch Trubisky forgot about him last week. So
yeah, literally, I had him in so many leagues, and then he has 0 until the last drive of the game, and it's like pass. I'm like, geez, don't you guys think you guys should have been doing this the entire fucking game? It's absurd. So that's that game. Excellent breakdown. That Tyler Conklin went right under my radar. So that should be a decent game. Who knows? The AFC's picking up a little bit. Jets are improving. Jags are improving. So that'll be cool to see.
Do you want me to do one more? Because I know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
all right, so I'm going to go into one more game so that we're kind of even on the back-to-backs. So the next game is the Cardinals versus the Panthers, and I do not like the fact that this is a 42.5 over-under because I'm really hoping that this is the week that Kyler Murray shows out. God, please, God willing, this is the week. Is this the week? I don't know. If it's not the week, this is the battle of 2 dog quarterbacks. Baker is the absolute worst quarterback I've ever seen in my life. Maybe worse than Jacoby Brissett on the Dolphins. I literally have seen 15 clips circulating on Twitter of him absolutely throwing muffins out there, just trash can throws, missing his receiver wide open. His feet look terrible under pressure. It's just, listen, I don't want to say I told you so, but I fucking told you so. This guy is dog, man. So quarterbacks, you're only playing Kyler. You have to play Kyler. You just have to play Kyler. Last week was he couldn't buy a touchdown, like Ray said. He couldn't buy a touchdown, but he played relatively well. He threw the ball a bunch. He got the ball to Marquise Brown. Like, if he gets touchdown, he has 20-plus point upside. We just want to see that 30, 40-point game soon. When D-Hop comes back, I'm sure we'll see it. But for now, you got to play him. You can't play Baker ever. Throw him in the garbage. Like, he's done. On the ground, James Conner, he had a really, really subpar week last week. We knew it was going to be like that. He was dealing with the injury. He was limited, and then he came back, and he's gonna be efficient, but coming off injury, and until we see him get back into form, coming off the rust from that, you're still gonna play him, but you can't expect a super high ceiling from him. And the way this Arizona offense is going, it's just his upside is definitely limited in that factor. On the Carolina side of the ball, Christian McCaffrey is dirted. I said it in the group chat. So sad, so unfortunate. Like, if you have Christian McCaffrey, you better have Chuba Hubbard or some sort of backup. I know we saw Chuba Hubbard play absolutely terribly last year in a full-fledged backup cuff role. And now he has Deontay Foreman, who has looked efficient in his career. So it's going to be a committee. If you have CMC, you better have a backup, or just pick up Chuba and just throw him in and hope. He's going to pace Deontay, I'm sure, in touches and snaps and stuff. But, man, you can't be excited. They're saying in Carolina that there's still optimism he plays. CMC kind of like, I mean, at this point, he could rest 2 days in practice and play easily. Like, he's so he knows that team so well. So, or that game plan so well. So we hope to see him back, but if not, it's really looking bad on the Carolina side of the ball for running backs. Through the air. On Arizona side of the ball, it's very similar to last week. It's a solid matchup through the air. That's why I'm hoping Kyler pops out. Marquise Brown is a really solid play this week. He was your MENTA of the week last week. He popped out. He had 28 points without a touchdown. Like, he was going crazy. And then it's the same story as last week as well. Greg Dortch, kind of a solid player, who's going to get some catches. He's going to go for some yards. He looks really athletic with the ball in his hands, and Kyler kind of likes him in the pass game. So until D-Hop comes back, you can kind of throw him in as a sneaky play. The interesting thing is Rondale Moore is looking like he may come back here. I don't know about this week, but soon. And I know that they love him and they want to get him involved and they want him to be on the field as soon as possible. He was a very highly touted prospect out of college. Didn't really get the play last year, but they definitely want to use him. So look for him on the waivers. He may be a good player coming up soon. And then at tight end, Zach Ertz, he's just a solid play every week. Last week, it's hard. If he doesn't get a touchdown, he's not going to see a ton of volume. He's going to get you enough volume and enough yards to kind of get you a solid week from tight end, but his upside is so limited. He's pretty old at this point. Like, he's just a security blanket. He could be okay for you at tight end, so you got to play him, but he's really at that fringe tight end 10, tight end 11, like in the rankings for me. So on Carolina side of the ball, through the air, like, I honestly don't think you can play anybody through the air for Carolina anymore. Like, it's really, really bad. It was looking like DJ Moore, you could kind of play him and he would get enough catches or maybe a touchdown. But man, like, Baker cannot get the ball to DJ Moore. And DJ Moore is probably, for most people, if they pick DJ Moore, that is their biggest miss of all their drafts, just because he has looked absolutely abysmal. The quarterback position is just so much worse than even Sam Darnold. Like, it's just so bad. So personally, I would feel really bad starting any Carolina player on offense. It's a solid matchup. So, the price you paid for DJ Moore, you can play him if you have to. But if you drafted somebody like a Christian Kirk later, or you got somebody in the later rounds like a Rashad Bateman that you could throw in there, like, I would really, really be swapping DJ Moore out of my lineups, or at least throwing him in the flex if you really have to. And then that's about it in terms of Carolina. Like, I'm just not playing anybody through the air there. It's really, really trash, man. And I feel bad because you have DJ Moore, but
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not spoiled enough to have like a pivot from DJ Moore, so I'm going to be starting him. But all I gotta say is Hollywood. What's
Yeah.
good, baby? Coming out parties. A wide receiver 8 so far, man. So that's one of your and I's hits. Like you and I definitely tried to target like those receivers who are going in rounds 5, 6, and 7 that we thought had that wide receiver 1 upside, because that's really how you win leagues when your team is so balanced to where like those late round receivers that you got can give you that volume that you need to put a wide receiver 1, maybe even 2 numbers. So it was really great to see Hollywood finally pop out like that and have that MENTA of the week moment. 17 targets is absolutely absurd. So that's really exciting. I got Hollywood and I have DJ Moore, so they'll be going back and forth. I never like when my fantasy players play each other because the game script is so stuck. Like there's not really that many possibilities. If there's a blowout on one side, one player is going to suffer and one player is not going to. Whereas if all my players are playing separate teams, the odds of me having favorable game scripts are increased. So that's kind of unfortunate, but like you said, it's a decent matchup, so we'll see what happens there. And then I'll take the floor now. On my next matchup, I have the Chargers visiting the Houston Texans with an over-under of 44, and the Texans in this one are the underdogs. They are +5. Justin Herbert, quarterback 7 so far, so he's not where you guys want him to be ADP-wise. You drafted him as the quarterback 3 consensus off the board right after Herbert, or right after Mahomes and Allen. So he's not doing too crazy right now, but honestly, it's just because he's not himself. This rib injury has really, really been taking a toll on the Chargers in general. He looks just so out of it. Jacksonville was absolutely able to pummel them on defense. I didn't think Jacksonville's defense is that good. It just really sucks. All you can do is really, if you're a Herbert owner, is put him out there and hope that week by week he's getting more healthy, you know? And then I can't believe I'm saying this, but maybe there's a positive game script in there. Maybe Houston's able to like put it to him. I don't know. David Mills, you never really know. They just look really bad the Chargers just look really weak. They just put Bosa on IR. They just put Slater on IR. So maybe the Texans are able to get it going early on. That'll give Herbert that game script to where he's going to have to throw the ball a lot. He threw the ball 45 times and 48 times in the last 2 weeks. So that's exactly what you want from Herbert. He just has to pull through. Keenan Allen's on the uptick. I'll get into that in a second. So if you're an Herbert owner, you got to start him, obviously. And then you're not touching the Texans side of the ball. And then Austin Eckler, man. I'm an Austin Eckler owner. He's an RB13, but it's so skewed because of the PPR points he's getting. Like, if you're in a full PPR league like we are, these targets are saving your life. He's gotten like 8 catches and 9 catches the last 2 weeks. Other than that, he's done absolutely nothing. They're putting Sony Michel out there. They're putting, what's his name out there too? I can't think of his name right now. They're just
Josh Kelly.
Josh Kelly. They're putting everybody out there in kind of like a committee role. So it's really not great. Like I said, these receptions are what's saving him. If you have Eckler, you have to put him out there. But to me, he's more of an RB2 now. He's not really an RB1. However, Houston's run defense is like the worst in the league. We just saw Khalil Herbert go off for them. Week 1, JT went for 31 touches for 161 and a touch. And then versus the Broncos, Javonte was able to go 15 for 75, and Melvin was able to go 10 for 47 in week 2. So all these numbers translate to Austin Eckler should be able to get it going on the ground this week. So if he doesn't get it going, I'm going to be really disappointed. It's a huge red flag for me. Just for him as a running back, if you can't get it going on this really bad D line, then there's some huge concerns there. So this is my last week of like, all right, I'm sticking out hope. He's going to get the targets. He's going to do really, really good and be efficient in the limited touches he's getting. So I'm finally expecting him to break the end zone this week and get a touchdown because Houston's run defense is that bad. And then going over to Houston's side of the ball through the run game, Dameon Pierce, he's the only guy I'm going to be starting here. He's my RB20 this week, so I have him as a top 20 play. He's the preferred option in Houston on the ground game when they have a tough game, when it's close. Granted, the only thing is that Houston's not that good. So more often than not, they're going to be in a negative game script for the running backs. And Rex Burkhead is the preferred target there when they're on 2-minute drives, when they're really trying to get the ball going. Towards the end of the game, Dameon Pierce was absolutely game scripted out. They had Rex Burkhead on every drive. They were in that crazy game where they try to come from behind. That's when David Mills threw that interception. It was targeted towards Rex Burkhead. So Dameon Pierce, he's great and all. He looks really good between the tackles. The only thing is he's just so limited because Rex Burkhead exists and he doesn't get involved in the targeting game. So to me, he's just a low-end RB2. Nothing really you can do there, but he's an RB20 this week. So if you have him, you're going to start him, you know? And then through the air, Mike Williams, wide receiver 36 so far. He's just been that boomer bust typical guy that we thought he was going to be. I know you and I had higher hopes for him because of the contract they got, because Keenan was supposed to be declining a little bit. Last week, I guess it was just a weird week versus the Chargers. I'm not really sure. But I expected more from Mike Williams last week. And we didn't get that. So this is one of those weeks where I really, really hope that he's able to do something. Keenan Allen is back. So maybe he's able to take away some of that attention. Hopefully Keenan Allen's back. I'm not going to say he is for sure. But he had one catch for 15 yards last week. Granted, that one catch was a touchdown. So it made the week not heinous. But if you're a Mike Williams owner, you're not as happy as you wanted to be so far throughout the season, because you really expected him to be that solidified, consistent wide receiver 2 with consistent wide receiver 1 upside. So yeah, hopefully it's a bounce back week for him this week. And then Keenan Allen, I didn't write anything on him because we're not really sure where he's going to play. But when he's active, you're going to start him. He's got that chemistry with Herbert. I don't know the exact stat, but through their careers, Herbert and Keenan Allen, they have the most catches for a quarterback wide receiver duo in the history of the NFL. Beating Randy Moss, beating Joe Montana and his receivers. So obviously he's his safety blanket. He loves him. So if Keenan Allen's out there, you're going to roll him. I don't know how he's going to do if the hamstring injury is there, but Houston's a really good matchup for him. So if Keenan Allen's there, you're going to play him. And then tight end wise, I'm not starting any of these guys. And then Brandon Cooks. He's the only guy who you're going to start on the Houston side of the ball. It's a favorable matchup because the Chargers are so banged up. And then on top of that, if the Chargers are who we think they are, and they're not this fraud that everybody is seeing right now, it should be a positive game script for him. So Texans really should be able to dish the ball out a lot, and he's his favorite target. Literally every time I watch the Texans on Red Zone, a pass is to Brandon Cooks, and half the time it's a flag, which is really unfortunate, but he's their number one guy there. He just needs to produce. The targets are there. He just needs to really produce on that yards after catch. So I have him as a wide receiver 23 this week. However, if he doesn't really do much this week, I'm going to start dropping him into that wide receiver bottom 3 range. Right now, he's a wide receiver 3 with upside because of the targets alone. But if he can't produce in this matchup, I'm really going to severely downgrade him there. So yeah, wide receiver wise, it's kind of murky, man. Keenan Allen's hurt. Mike Williams is that boomer bust. Brandon Cooks is a boomer bust right now. And then on the run game too, Eckler's been murky. Dameon Pierce is murky. So it'll be an interesting game. And this game should solidify through 4 weeks how we see all these players fantasy wise.
Yeah, I agree. It's very interesting that we're sitting here saying that Houston could potentially have a chance against the Chargers. One thing to note is that, I like your breakdown of Dameon Pierce. It's very true. They're using him a lot on the ground, but he does not see anything really through the air. But the one thing I will say that is kind of beneficial for Dameon Pierce is that he saw 10 of 11 carries inside the 20. He's seen 6 of 7 carries within the 15, and he's seen all 3 carries within the 5. So they are using him in the red zone on the goal line. He is the guy they want to put the ball in his hands. But unless we see some movement in that pass game, which the coach did say he wants him to come out and be a better guy in the pass game, I don't know, he's kind of limited, especially on Houston. And so with that, we'll move into a game that on paper I wish was a good game, but it's probably not going to be. It is the Patriots versus the Packers. 40-point over-under. We got no Mac, all cheese, baby. Green Bay Cheeseheads, no Mac Jones this week.
All cheese.
Yeah, no Mac, all cheese this game. It's really going to be sketchy. 40 is super low. You think damn, the Patriots just put up points against the Ravens and it's Aaron Rodgers, but man, you could even bet under on this game and probably hit because these teams are not that good. The one thing that I will say is that this is a true game test to see if Dobbs can be consistent. And if him and Aaron Rodgers can get on the same page. So at quarterback, unfortunately, he can't start Mac Jones because he's probably not playing. I know they said that he is looking at surgery, maybe not looking at surgery. I know that it could expedite his way back onto the field within 4 weeks or whatever. But him playing this week is an absolute negative, in my opinion. If he plays, I'll just say I'm straight up wrong, but I really don't think he's going to play. Aaron Rodgers, look, man, we were saying it. We're kind of moving away from these known names going off and being those guys that we think they can be. And Aaron Rodgers is now in a position where he doesn't have much of an attack around him where he can get good enough points in fantasy. He's still an amazing quarterback, but he's just limited by the players around him. So you probably still start him because you're hoping for Aaron Rodgers to go off, and who knows? I mean, this New England team just gave up an absolute nuke to Lamar Jackson, so you can play him there. You're not starting Brian Hoyer if he plays ever. On the ground, New England is kind of, you said that New England kind of gets downgraded all around, but I think that their run game kind of gets upgraded if Mac Jones goes out. And I think we're starting to see the breakout of Ramondre Stevenson. He had 63% snap share last week. He had a bunch of touches. He looked extremely electric. He got into the end zone. Damian Harris did not look nearly as good as him. And, I think Damian Harris is solid, but if the Patriots start getting down a lot like they were last week against the Ravens, Ramondre Stevenson with Ty Montgomery out is going to be the main passing back, and he's spelling Damian Harris on the ground. So we're going to see Ramondre Stevenson kind of take over that, 60 to 40 role and kind of have more of himself game scripted in than game scripted out, if I had to guess. So right now, I think you can play Ramondre as a flex play, and you could probably play Damian Harris as a flex play as well, but I would be more confident in Ramondre on the ground and through the air. He just has more upside. On the ground in Green Bay, actually, AJ Dillon was limited with a knee injury. So I don't know how serious it is. It doesn't seem like it's super serious, but he's limited. And so AJ, your Aaron Jones, you're really confident starting him. I mean, we know he's a superstar. We know he can have extremely, extremely big games. He's a focal point of that offense. So you have to play him every week. And if AJ Dillon plays, I think you're still throwing him in there because you drafted him with such high capital. Unless you have a really good flex backup to throw in there, maybe I would probably play like a Curtis Samuel over him, who's seen a bunch of points, or someone in that range. But you probably got to play AJ Dillon just because of the talent. Through the air, you can't really start anybody through the air for New England, especially if Brian Hoyer's playing. Brian Hoyer is a solid backup, and he's been the backup there for so long, but we just don't know what it's going to be like with Brian Hoyer playing at quarterback there. And so Jacoby Myers, he's a great wide receiver, and he's the number one target, but I don't know. It's just sketchy to me. I would replace him in your lineup if you had another option, like a Russell Gage, like you did last week or something like that. And then on the Green Bay side of the ball, it's really weird. Lazard, he's looking like Aaron Rodgers' favorite target just because they have the connection, and I know he really likes to throw the ball to him. But it's kind of this is the true wide receiver by committee, if I had to say anything. I mean, Dobbs had a pop off, and Lazard will probably get a pop off at some point this year. Christian Watson's looking like a bust. So I would not have much confidence starting any of these players through the air. Robert Tonyan is interesting. You could potentially play him because I know him and Rodgers kind of have a little connection, but he hasn't seen much production through 3 weeks so far. So you're probably sketching, and there's probably better options on the waiver wire. But yeah, I mean, this game, 40-point over under, man, it's just going to be so bad.
Yeah. Hey, man, but like you said, no mac all cheese.
Yes, sir.
That's a banger. Don't got to touch up on that. That's a really good one there. Transitioning over, I've got another game that I'm not really looking forward to too much. The Washington Commanders are visiting the Dallas Cowboys with an over-under of 41.5, and the Cowboys are -3 in this one. I'm not touching either quarterback here. Cooper Rush, no. Carson Wentz, he's been the QB6 so far, but I just really think it's kind of an anomaly. Not really touching anybody there. And then on the ground, Antonio Gibson, RB12 so far through 3 weeks, not really bad. I have him as a top 20 play. However, to me, he's TD dependent. The game script is usually going to be negative in their case, which doesn't benefit him because they got JD McKissic there in the backfield, and his yards per carry are really not that good. So it's not a good sign there. And then on top of that, to me, Brian Robinson's a better running back than him. He's going to be ramping up, just like you mentioned last week when you covered the Washington game. So, yeah, I just don't know how it's really going to be when he gets back there. It's going to get even murkier for him, and the targets have been dropping. But Saquon was able to do good last week versus them, so maybe Gibson can show some life there. And then transitioning over to the Dallas side of the ground, I've got Ezekiel Elliott. He's the RB38 so far, and Pollard's the RB24. So obviously the dividends are paying for Pollard owners compared to the Zeke owners. Pollard looks absolutely explosive on the minimal carries that he's getting. He went for 13 for 105 last week, and Zeke went for 15 for 73. The only issue is when it comes down to the goal line and stuff, Zeke's going to get the touches. He's the bigger back. He's a brute force. I don't really see Pollard getting into that red zone area unless Zeke gets hurt or like Zeke brings them down there in like a huge gash play, which is not really Zeke's capability anymore. You know, he's really just that grinded out type of running back now. So both of them to me are kind of just RB2-ishes. Pollard's more of an RB3 because of the opportunity share not being as high. But I think that this week they're both solid starts. It's not a terrible matchup. The D-line there is decent, but they're kind of banged up. I was reading some injuries over there. And then the game script maybe is in their favor if Cooper Rush is able to get it going. So that's really it on the Dallas side of the ball. And then on through the air, we've got Mr. Seidy Lamb, who's your guy. I know he's one of your guys. Finally, he had a really good week. He could have even had a bigger week last week if he didn't drop that pass. But he's just an absolute target hog. He's a clear-cut wide receiver one with Cooper Rush or Dak Prescott. So you're really, really happy about that. Michael Gallup coming back to me can only benefit CeeDee Lamb's game because it'll drag some attention away from him. But yeah, nothing really much to say through him. He's got 11 targets week 1, 11 targets week 2, 12 targets week 1. So he's a wide receiver 1 through the rest of the schedule. Honestly, I love him. Not really much to say about him. And then transitioning over to Washington side of the ball, we've got Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel. Terry McLaurin's the wide receiver 21, so wide receiver 27 so far, and Curtis Samuel's the wide receiver 10 so far. So it's really crazy how things just get turned on their heads. But Terry McLaurin, as we saw last week, he's the garbage time king. They were doing absolutely nothing all game. And then Carson Wentz just force-fed him the ball. He was able to really get it going, so he saved some of your guys' weeks, hopefully. Scary Terry is not in full effect right now. It's very unfortunate. Tough matchup. Dallas gives up the 4th least passing yards per game, so I have him as a low-end wide receiver 2. And then Curtis Samuel, I have him as a low-end wide receiver 2 as well. He's just more of a safe play there. So, yeah, that's really about it there throughout this game.
Yeah.
Oh, and then Dalton Schultz, he was a full participant in practice, so he should be back on the field. So if you have him, you're probably starting him because the tight ends are super low desolate everywhere else, you know?
Yeah. That game will be a little bit boring in my opinion. Hopefully we see Dak back soon so the Cowboys become a little bit more high power, but Cooper Rush is getting the job done. We'll move on to a pretty solid game, actually. Well, I hope is pretty solid. It is the Broncos versus the Raiders. 45.5 point over under. Will these offenses finally click? Who knows? I mean, the Broncos can't get it done, and the Raiders are really not having a great time on offense either. So hopefully we see these offenses click. Maybe Russ is just bad. I don't know. He went from a really solid passing offense with, Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf to, Sutton and Judy, who aren't bad, but are probably a step down. So I don't know. At quarterback, Russ and Derek Carr, like those names, you want to say they're starters. But right now, it's seeming like if you could pick up like a Trevor Lawrence off the waiver or something like that, like you're probably playing him over them both, just until they can prove they can get it going. And not to mention, especially on Derek Carr's side of the ball, it's a really bad matchup. Denver's defense is really solid. So I don't know. If you have no other options, you play them, but I would really look elsewhere on both sides of the ball. At running back, Josh Jacobs was limited with like the illness, and he came in, he still had all the carries, and he was used more than everybody in that backfield. So if you have Josh Jacobs, like you kind of just got to play him as that like fringe RB2. He's going to get you a bunch of touches on the ground. He's not going to catch any passes through the air. Like he can get it done. Like if they see a ton of points, then he'll get into the end zone and he could be solid play. On Denver's side of the ball, it's interesting. The Javonte and this is something we discussed a lot in chat this past week. The Javonte and Melvin split is kind of trending away from Javonte, but I think that's because of just how bad the Broncos offense has been. There's just something weird there. They're trying to get it going. They're trying to do too much. Javonte has had more snaps in 2 out of the 3 games. And he got more touches last week, even though he had less snap percentage than Melvin Gordon. So if you're a Javonte owner, you're putting him out there every week. I think he is the lead back there for sure. And as the year goes on, he's going to get even more scripted into their offense, into their game scheme. And then Melvin, like you could kind of play him. He got into the end zone. He's a solid flex player if you have to play him, but again, like there's so many options out there, a receiver for the flex and stuff like that. Like I'd probably be shying away from him if I could. And then at tight end, you're not playing Albert Okwuegbunam, or however you say his name. I can never pronounce it. But Darren Waller is an absolute stud, man. If they can get it going in Las Vegas, he is going to see probably the most benefit outside of Devontae Adams, just because him and Derek Carr have an unstoppable connection, and he is a stud. He dropped 2 touchdown passes last week, like in his hands, dropped them, and he would have had a monster game if he didn't drop those. So you're playing him every week.
Yeah, for sure. That game is it's interesting to see how everybody was so high on Denver and their fantasy production, and they really haven't been able to get it clicking, partly due to coaching and stuff like that. Yeah. Maybe this will be a bounce back for them. It's a really good game. So yeah, it's an 0-3 team versus the Broncos, who I don't know how they won last week. That game was so terrible. But yeah, so that's that. And then I'm going to just cover on my last game of the slate. I know you have Sunday football. I'm going to do the Monday night football game. So the Rams are going to be visiting the 49ers, and it's an over-under 43 points. And the Rams are +1 in this one. So they have the 49ers being favored here. It's kind of weird to me, but hey, man, Vegas, I guess they know stuff. Quarterback-wise, Matt Stafford, QB 22 so far. He's got high upside just because the receivers there are so potent, but his floor is not super really great because they've got Cam Akers, because they've got Darrell Henderson, and Sean McVay does not mind running the ball. It's a tough divisional game. I don't really like him this week. 49ers give the least yards per game to the quarterback as well. I saw that stat. So if you have Stafford this week, you're not going to be too happy with his production, in my opinion. But if you don't have another pivot, you'll probably be playing him. So you're just going to have to go with it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he has a super pop game. But Stafford this week, I'm really off of. If you're in DFS, if you're in betting or anything like that, I would pivot away from Stafford. And then on the ground, on the Rams side of the ball, it's just such an RBBC that we have no clue what's going on. Cam Akers, RB47 so far. Darrell Henderson, RB40 so far. It's just going to continue to be a committee throughout the year. Honestly, in my opinion, I'd favor the side of Cam Akers over Darrell Henderson right now. Obviously, after week 1, it looked like Darrell Henderson was the better play. But so far, Darrell Henderson has just been waved out. Cam Akers was able to really get it going last week. He didn't look too great. Neither of them did. But he's just getting more touches. And if you're on the Akers side of things as a fantasy owner, you just have to be happier right now. Akers to me is really a risky RB3, and then Darrell Henderson's a low-end flex at best to me. So I'm avoiding both of these players if I can. If I have another matchup in play that I like, I'd probably be starting either of them over anybody in the Rams backfield until I get some more clarity or until there's an injury that takes place. And then on the 49ers side of the ball, you're going to be starting Jeff Wilson. He's the RB1 there so far. There's no Mason. Everybody's just not really playing out. He's just the RB1 so far there. Jeff Wilson's the clear cut. If you have him, you're going to be starting him. I have him as the RB22 this week. The ceiling's not crazy high because they have Debo there, because Jimmy G struggles to move the ball as of right now. But in a year where running backs are really, really hard to come by and really, really hard to find a running back with a clear workload, if you have Jeff Wilson, you're happy you have him and you're going to be starting him this week. So that's really that. On the receiver side of things, Cooper Kupp, my wide receiver, 1 this week. The floor is just so high there that it's just absolutely insane. Last week, he had 4 for 44 through the passing game, but then he had 1 rush for 20 yards and a touchdown. So it's like, no matter what, he's going to produce for you. My little Cooper Kupp, as Matthew Berry would say, he's just a guy, man. He's a guy who's a guy who's a guy, and he's going to get you guy points. So he's my wide receiver 1 this week. I love him. And then Allen Robinson, I'm starting to get a little bit nervous as an A-Rob owner who's got a couple shares. He only had 2 catches for 23 yards on 5 targets last week. It's just, I think they need to call more plays for him. If Allen Robinson doesn't get more plays called for him soon, it's going to be abandoned ship time for me. I'm just really scared. I need the targets to be there. The snap percentages are great. He's got 90% plus every game. But for me, he's no longer a wide receiver 2. He's a wide receiver 3 with upside moving forward until I see something from there. And then on the 49ers side of the ball, we've got Deebo Smith, wide receiver 33 so far. So really not paying the dividends that we've wanted to so far. But I have him as the wide receiver 8 this week. As we know from last week, the Rams are a really, really friendly matchup for wide receivers. They're bottom of the pack versus the pass. You could see some Jalen Ramsey on him, but Deebo Samuel, he transitions to the slot, to the backfield, to the outer banks. So I don't think there's going to be too much shadow coverage, and Jalen Ramsey's no longer a shadow corner. He just plays his side of the field. So that's really that. I think he's in a really good spot to have some high targets to Jimmy G coming back, the positive game script maybe. So if you have Deebo, this is maybe that week we get a super popper from you, maybe 22, 25 points, which is better than those 16-point games we've been getting from him so far. And then Brandon Ayuk, sneaky play. He didn't do anything fantasy-wise last week. However, he was able to get 8 targets. He got 3 for 39 and a touchdown. So it's not going to scream at you on the box score at the end of the day. But Jimmy G loves him, man. 8 targets in a game. If you're in a wide receiver 3 league, honestly, you should not be on your waivers whatsoever if you're in a 12-man league, especially if you're in PPR. Those targets are going to translate into catches more often than not. So if you have Brandon Ayuk or you're a Brandon Ayuk owner, hold it down. I think he's going to do some things. If you're in DFS, sneaky play this week. I really like him. And then tight end wise, you're going to be starting both here. Higbee, tight end 7 through 3 weeks. He's just a safety blanket. He's what we thought Allen Robinson would be is what Higbee's going to be. Exactly what you said last week is exactly what I'm going to say this week. If you have him, the tight end landscape is just so desolate that you just got to follow it. He's in a high octane offense with them, and him and Stafford have that chemistry. So I'm really chilling with Higbee as my tight end there. You just really hope that he can punch in one touchdown, and then he can have that really game-changing week for you. And then Kittle, I really like him this week. He wasn't really able to do much last week, but the matchup is really good. I have him as my tight end 4, and it should be a really solid game for him. Kittle owners, I know you're happy to have him back, and that's really all I have to say about it. Really quick breakdown there.
Yeah, this game, I have a feeling this game is going to continue the streak of really bad primetime games. Like, something in me just says it's going to be really low scoring. I don't know why. Maybe I'm wrong, but those defenses are strong. I will say, I said in week 1, you play Darrell Henderson until his wheels fall off. I just didn't think it was going to be this soon, and I'm definitely erring on the side of Cam Akers now as well. They want to get him involved. And of course, Cooper Kupp gets his only rushing touchdown of his entire career when he faces me in fantasy. Interesting, huh? Shout out Vega. So yeah, we'll move on to the last game, which is the Sunday night game, which is the Chiefs versus the Buccaneers. Really good game, 45-point over/under. This is just a juggernaut battle. Is this going to be the time where Mahomes finally snatches the throne, snatches the fire from Tom Brady and puts Tom Brady down into his grave for him to retire? We'll see. You're playing Mahomes every single week. He's not been super crazy like we thought he was going to be. He is more consistently a 25-point guy with the possibility of going nuke for 50, but he's not going to be a 40-50 every week. He's going to be in that 20-25 range, which is solid. He's great, Tom Brady, you can't play him right now. They're just anemic on offense. They haven't scored many touchdowns. He's getting his passing weapons back, but you can't really play them. On the ground, at running back, you're playing both options here. CEH, we say it time and time again, he just does not see a ton of snaps and a ton of work, but he catches a ton of passes out of the backfield. They use him in the red zone. He's gonna get he's basically the number one option there in the backfield. So you got to play him until he proves that we can't play him. And then on Tampa Bay side of the ball, Leonard Fournette's low-key a sneaky little trade, buy low option for me. I know he didn't have that great of a game last week, but with these weapons coming back in, they feed the shit out of him. He gets a ton of touches, and if he can stay healthy, he's going to get a lot of fantasy production moving forward. He tweeted that tweet out that said, "I'm going to get into the end zone soon. Sorry, fantasy manager." So hopefully we see that. Through the air, Kansas City is like Patrick Mahomes said, wide receiver by committee. Juju had a really bad game moving forward or last week. So moving forward, you're hoping he bounces back. Travis Kelce is obviously the number one option there. He's going to continue to be the number one option there. But you just hope that Kansas City is going to be able to move the ball and put up more points than they did last week versus the Colts. It's really tough to play anybody there unless they're like a flex play, wide receiver 3. Juju, like Seville is sitting him for Smitty this week for Devontae Smith. So, I think that's the smart move. On Tampa side of the ball, Mike Evans is back after his suspension. You're going to start him. He's an auto start every week. Tom Brady loves him. He throws the ball deep to him. He's going to be good while he plays. And then behind him, Julio, Gage, Godwin, like all of them are banged up. All of them are kind of, they might see rust or might have limitations. So it's sketchy to play them. If you really got to play them and they come and they're active for these games, you can maybe throw them in the flex, but I would err on the side of not. And you're not playing any tight ends for Tampa Bay. So that's it for the slate of games.
Yep. That's another game that honestly, finally the primetime games are decent. Last week, the primetime games were really bad across the board.
Yeah.
So hopefully this week we finally get some life back, So that's that. Transitioning from the NFL real world to the Schwep universe, we go. This is one of my favorite times of the podcast. Just give you guys a quick breakdown of what happened last week, and then we'll get into some predictions. So last week, I versed Kyle Starkman, and I was the highest scoring team of the week. I dropped 154, and I was able to beat out Kyle 137. I told him if he listened to the podcast, Dalton Schultz will probably not play. Granted, there wasn't really anybody on the waiver he could have pivoted to. I was looking at the points afterwards. But still, I don't know, man. You got to give yourself a shot. That's all you can really do sometimes. And then my mental of the week was on my team, Hollywood Brown. He was like that X factor for me. Your game, you fell short. You dropped to 132. Vega was able to beat you to go 3-0. You fell to 0-3. He was able to drop 146. Strictly because of Lamar Jackson, man. The quarterbacks in our league are crackhead, and Lamar Jackson really won him his week. And J.J. busted. He only had like 4 points, and Saquon had that big touchdown run. Just a really, really bad beat for you there. Going over to another game, Kings v. Mr. 0-3. The Bomba Factory is out of business so far. So he fell. He only dropped 79 points to Seidenberg's 126. Granted, Zvi's team is a shell of itself right now because of all the injuries, so we'll see how that bounces back. Seville was able to go 3-0. He dropped 145. He beat Max. He dropped 145. Max dropped 138. Ezekiel Elliott was able to pull through for him and give him that game-winning touchdown to really solidify things for him. So he moves to 3-0 there. That's a huge boost for him. And then Ray, in a must-win game, was 0-2, and Daniel was 2-0. He was able to squeak out a game. He dropped 130, and Daniel dropped 118. To me, it was more Daniel's team just didn't pull up, and Ray's team did decent. So I'm not going to give Ray too much credit on the W, but a W is a W, man. He saved himself there. So that's really that in the Schwep Universe recap of week 3. And then going on to week 4, it's a brand new week, fresh start for everybody. I'm going to get into the matchups. First matchup I'll break down is Mr. Kings V versus Raekwon James. Zvi is 0-3 and Ray is 1-2. So this is going to be a very, very important game. It could either determine a 2-2 fresh restart or an 0-4 bottom of the barrel mentalness. Zvi's already sketching. He's telling me I'm not doing that ESPN body shoot. He's freaking out a little bit. He's worried about, what if I come in last, Michael? Is there anything else I can do? I'm like, brother, you better talk to the league, man. We already decided on this. So this is going to be a really big game here. In this game, I have Ray winning. Simple as that. I just have Zvi having too many injuries. I don't know how Herbert and Keenan are going to look. It's just very sketchy to me. Their ceiling is not what I'm looking at it as. So that's really that. On top of that, Gabe Davis being out, downgraded to a DNP this week after an LP yesterday is just really concerning to me. I don't know he's going to pivot and be able to put in his flex spot there. And then Jameis might be out. So he has Olave in the starting lineup. I know Olave is supposed to be a good play this week, but what if he gets limited because the quarterback is not there? So I just have Ray winning this week simply because V's team is just getting riddled with injuries.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Olave was going to be my X factor for Zvi, just to maybe keep him in the game. I do have Ray winning, just because he has Tom Brady at quarterback, but with Justin Herbert's injury and the way that the Chargers are looking, it's not even going to, it may not even be a big gap there in terms of points. So yeah, I think it's a pretty solid win for Ray this week. And then I'll move into a really big game, which is Shevil versus Mr. Kyle. This is a make or break week for Kyle. He's sitting at 1-2, and he plays a juggernaut and 3-0 Mr. Cheville. Hopefully he can take him down. This is a big game. If Kyle's team can be healthy, they both are dealing with a bunch of injuries, a bunch of significant injuries. I mean, we got Damian Pierce, who's questionable. We got Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's questionable. We have Kyle already moved him out of his lineup, but we had Michael Thomas, who's questionable. Dalton Schultz, who's injured. So who we're hoping is going to play, but still also questionable. So if Kyle's team can be healthy, it should be a really close matchup. They have pretty tough matchups for their stars on both sides of the ball. In terms, like, Diggs's matchup is the one really, really big super explosion versus Baltimore. But I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown versus Seattle, Mark Andrews versus Buffalo, Devontae Adams versus Denver, like, those are tough. And like, then on Kyle's side of the ball, Derrick Henry versus the Colts, Chubb versus Atlanta, whose run defense has been solid. Like, they have tough matchups for their stars on both sides of the ball. And then, the X factor for Sevilla is really just going to end up being Mark Andrews. I like Diggs a lot. We just know he's going to pop. But I think Mark Andrews in that Buffalo matchup, if he can break through the Buffalo tough defense, it'll really, really be important. And the one thing for Kyle is this might be a primetime Sunday Night Football Mahomes upset, man. If Mahomes goes crazy in prime time and is able to get it done and steal that torch from Tom Brady, like, he could do the upset on Sunday Night Football, man. Who knows? But I personally have Sevilla taking a dub. It's still a close matchup. So yeah, I have Sevilla winning it.
Yeah, it kills me to predict Sevilla to go 4-0. But I have to side with him here. I told you guys when I was breaking down the Buffalo game, if you have Diggs in your lineup this week and you aren't really that competent, like really bad, lacking in the other departments, I'm going to pick you to win because I think Diggs is absolutely going to go crazy this week.
Yeah.
But as you said, Mahomes has that chip on his shoulder with Brady. You never really know. But I would probably side with Sevilla here so far. So far, we're agreeing on everything, kind of like last week. The next matchup I'm going to get into is yours. You are 0-3 and Seidenberg is 2-1. This is going to be a really tough matchup here. Personally, for me, it kills me to say, but I do have Seidenberg winning this week. I've picked you every other week so far, so don't hate me. But I have him winning just because I think that Jalen Hurts is in a really, really prime spot. You do have A.J. Brown, so maybe that'll limit it a little bit and cap him. But I don't like the over-under in the Cardinals game, so I'm not really that confident in Kyler popping. The Patterson, you did tell me it was rest. I had that in my notes as a reason why I picked him because of DNP today and yesterday. So that maybe won't be too much of a factor. But I really love Joe Mixon tonight. I really like Jamar Chase tonight. I think Bateman is finally going to see that uptick in targets versus a high-octane offense like Buffalo. And then I think Pittman is going to do what Pittman does. I'm nervous for Jefferson because of what I've seen in the past 2 weeks. I keep thinking, yeah, he's going to get back to what I think he's going to get back to, but I haven't seen it yet. It's a 9:30 game. 9:30 games are weird to me. I'm not really sure how that's going to play out. ETN is a really good matchup, but J-Rob is on the centerfold right now. It's just, I don't know. To me, it's just kind of sketchy on your side to where I feel more comfortable. However, I will say this, Seidenberg, if you listen to the podcast, you should take Michael Carter out of that flex and you should put Tyler Lockett in there. Because if you have Tyler Lockett in there versus Detroit, I think that's a really good matchup for you. I don't know if you listen to the pod. These are always true tests for me. I like to drop a little nugget or two to see how things work. But I do have Seidenberg edging this one out versus you, Austin.
Yeah. I have myself winning, obviously. And it's mainly because I have A.J. Brown to limit Jalen Hurts, but I also really think that the positive script for Travis Etienne, like, he's really going to see an uptick there. And CeeDee Lamb has a great matchup. I mean, he popped off last week. Hopefully he can get in the end zone again. I have myself winning just because our teams are very, very close, I think, in terms of just like talent across the board. And his matchups are slightly better. I do like Mixon a lot this week. But I think that if my running backs can keep up, and Cordell Patterson, they just actually they released something that said he was just rested again for the second straight practice. But if my running backs can keep up, then I think I definitely have a solid shot, because I think my wide receivers kind of edges out in terms of talent. And if they can, if they want to get Justin Jefferson involved and they actually do get him involved and he has a good game, then I can keep up. So it's going to be solid. But I have myself winning, obviously. And so with that one, I'll move into your matchup, which is you versus Dan. And this matchup is going to be crazy, because is CMC in or is CMC out? And that's a really, really make or break for Mr. Daniel. Listen, Josh is going nuke on Baltimore. Josh is going nuke on Baltimore, and that is going to be a big discrepancy in points versus Kirk Cousins. And I've lost to super matchups at quarterback every week. So if he doesn't, if Kirk doesn't put up at least 25, it's going to be really tough for him to pick up the points on the outside of that position. It's a really good week for Jamal Williams. This is, if there was one week where you're like, I have Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift is out, this is the week, because it's a really easy matchup versus Seattle. On the ground. The thing is that Dan's team with Hill, Mike Williams, Waller, if they hit their ceiling, he could really, really pop off. So if he gets a 40 spot from Tyreek, he sees 30 from Mike Williams, Darren Waller gets, 20, he's going to really be competing with you. So that's one thing. Your flex is also, a little bit questionable with Russell Gage. He's injured. Are there players coming back? Maybe you'll swap him out for somebody. I don't know. But I do have you taking the dub, upsetting the projections. The projections have you losing by 10 points or something stupid. But I do have you upsetting the projections and taking the dub.
Yeah, and this one, now that Christian, I really didn't know who was going to win this game. This is such a 50-50 for me. Yeah. But with McCaffrey being maybe even limited if he does play, that's huge for me, gives me a huge bonus. And we're going to say this throughout the year. My flex is going to be a question mark. Every week in and week out, I'm just going to have to grind the waiver wire. Mm-hmm. Last week, hit big. Russell Gage absolutely popped off, 13 targets, 12 catches, and he had the game, literally last second touchdown that really saved me to give me that cushion versus Kyle. But my cushion's always going to be there. In this matchup, God, it's really hard. I'm going to have to pick me just because I have confidence in my team. But I to this day, I don't really know my flex spot yet. I'm really going to have to pivot through there. I just think that McCaffrey being hurt, Cousins stealing, if they don't hit at 9:30 a.m., he's chalked in my opinion. If Pollard doesn't have a good game versus Washington, it's going to be tough. So I just have me winning there just because I feel like my floor is safer than his. His ceiling's much higher, but I have my floor being safer there. So I'm going to pick me there. So we do agree on that. And then closing out the Schwep matchups for week 4, we have 3-0 Vega versus 1-2 Max Brown. And in this one, it's very easy for me. I have Vega winning. I think he's going to be 4-0. Honestly, Max has great matchups. But to me, I think Vega's an absolute powerhouse. When you have Lamar as your quarterback, you have Cooper Kupp as your wide receiver, and you have Saquon as your running back. You have the RB1 right now. You have the wide receiver 1 right now. You have the QB1 right now. He has ones across the board. I just don't see a way where they fall off. I think they're going to be consistent all year, so I think Vega's going to have a banger team. I saw a report that said James Conner, they're going to try and get him more involved this week because he's a little healthier. So, yeah, man, it's just... I don't know if Julio Jones is going to play this week in his flex, but I like Kittle this week. I think that Amari is going to be a consistent play now, even with Brisket at the helm. Yeah. I just think that Vegas team is set up week in and week out to have such a solid floor and then such a banger ceiling that it's going to be hard for me to choose against them this week, and I have Vega winning.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's a little bit closer than you do just because the matchups are really good for Max, really good. And his lineup top to bottom sounds really good. But the players that we think are great, they just have not produced really well in the previous weeks. So if he sees that uptick in his ceiling hits, he could potentially beat out Vega. And I hope he does. I hope we don't have a 4-0. I want I want the league to be balanced and things like that. It helps me out, especially at 0-3 and things like that. So I would agree with you, and I think Vega does take this one, unfortunately.
For sure. So just to recap, we both have Vega beating Max. We both have me beating Daniel. We both have, I believe we picked Ray to beat Z, both of us, correct? And then I have Seidenberg winning and you have yourself winning. So that's really the only spot we vary at this week. So that concludes the Schwep matchups. It's going to be a really interesting week. And then in doing so, I think we should transition into our MENTA of the week. You can start this one off this week.
All right. So you and Ray are going to blood boiling, just hate this. But my MENTA of the week, I may be biased, is Travis Etienne. My man's on the Jacksonville Jaguars. Listen, he has not had a great snap percentage. It's not been horrible, but he has seen his touches go up in every single week thus far. He's had a solid 10-point floor in PPR because of his catching upside. He's versus a very high-power Eagles offense where there's going to be a ton of passing. He's going to be game scripted into the game, in my opinion. McKissick's outside of Antonio Gibson, McKissick's on 9 targets and 53% snap share versus the Eagles last week. I think we see a similar split with Etienne and J-Rob. Etienne is pacing James Robinson in break tackle percentage, efficiency metrics across the board. And the Eagles are middle of the pack in run D, but very, very solid in pass D. So those dump offs are going to be there. Hopefully Jalen's going to have scrambles, but hopefully he looks to Trevor is going to see those little, he's going to run the ball. He can get it going with his feet a little bit, but hopefully he looks to Etienne on those pass plays when he's in the game. This is two teams that play extremely fast. They're both top 10 in the NFL in terms of plays per game. And I think as Etienne gets more involved, like I said, more touches than the previous week, every week, that we're waiting on that breakout. And I think in a good matchup versus a high passing offense like the Eagles, this is the week. And that's why Travis Etienne is my MENTA of the week. I wanted to give little shout outs, honorable mentions to Khalil Herbert. He's going to pop off if Demont doesn't play, Khalil Herbert, and also Damian Pierce, because the matchup there is just going to be fucking nuke. So, but yeah, Travis Etienne is my MENTA of the week. Interesting.
I see you followed suit. I took the MENTA of the week from my own squad last week because Hollywood had hit. And this is crazy coincidence, but my MENTA of the week is on my team as well. Back-to-back weeks for me. I promise I don't do this on purpose. It's just we try to find players that aren't huge, that aren't highly favored, and we really expect them to have explosive games within that top 3 to 5 range. So the top 3 to 5 wide receiver of the week, running back of the week. And my MENTA of the week this week is Jamal Williams. I was trying not to get too hyped to him when I was breaking down that game, but to me, he's a top 5 play this week. He's been a top 10 RB in both weeks that Swift has been active so far. Granted, Swift has had those injuries, but he's made the most of his touches. In 2 starts without Swift, he averages 18.5 touches per game. So that's really good. He's going to get that workload. Josh Reynolds is a DNP both Wednesday and Thursday. I know last year we really thought Jamal was going to get that workload when DeAndre Swift got hurt, but Reynolds really stepped in there and kind of took over for a little bit. Granted, though, Jamal Williams did have COVID. A lot of people forget that. So he was on the up end and on the mesh from COVID. So he was kind of limited there as well. But he's been a DNP, so I really think that he's going to get the workload this week. On top of the workload, he faces the number 30 run defense this week in Seattle. It's an absolute cakewalk of a matchup. They allow the 3rd most points to running back so far this season. So that's just super smash matchup. He's got the workload, barring injuries, barring Swift being out. So that's just a match made in heaven there. On top of that, the Lions are 5-point favorites. I think they're going to have a favorable game script this week. And the cherry on top is that the Lions have the highest team total of any team this week. So that means they're projected to score a lot of points. So I really think Jamal is going to find the end zone this week. He's going to get you that touchdown. Obviously, touchdowns are what we covet the most in fantasy football because that's what gets you the most points. and I think he's going to get you a touchdown. I think he's going to rush for over 100 yards. He's not a top big name, but I think he's going to finish within the top 5 this week. So Jamal Williams is my MENTA of the week.
Yep, Jamal Williams is going to be a very, very high percentage DFS play. I can see it 100%. Sure. But I can see it. I mean, last year he was a premium handcuffed, and this year he is looking like you could play him even when DeAndre Swift is healthy. So I like the pick. 2 running backs.
Yeah, 2 running backs, and they're both on our squads. I hate that. I'm trying to distribute out the mentas, but hey, man, my menta hit last week, so I'm not gonna deny that he's on my team. I shouldn't do it. I think my menta is gonna hit this week.
Yep, that's facts. And so I guess we can move last but not least into the Schwep Drama Island portion. And I'll just start off and say that the 0-3 teams, man, they talk a lot, don't they?
Yes, they do. Yeah, I knew that was going to be the first thing we talked about here. Listen, man, the 0-3 teams have been chit-chatting a lot. Granted, obviously they're allowed to. Crans he's confident in his spew. He knows what he's talking about. Obviously, we're on a podcast together, so I value his opinion on football, and I'm sure everybody who listens does as well. But these 0-3 teams, they be talking a lot, man. Zv be chirping. I don't know.
Listen, man. If I'm going to be honest, I personally think my team is really good. Like, I have outlook for the future, and I think that it's really tough that I'm 0-3. The matchups I've had have been bad. I've had some bad breaks, but I don't think that I'm going to go winless for much longer. So I have confidence in my squad, and I'm willing to put my talk behind that. But when I look at Zv's team, man, he seems like a team that should be 0-3, man. It's tough, bro. I'm sorry, Zv, but your team is desolate deathness over there. I honestly, I'm sad. I'm 0-3. It sucks ass, but the league is really close. I win this week, I'm right back in. I could be 6th, 5th place. I win again the next week, I could be top 4. You know what I'm saying? So it's I'm confident in my spew. We be going at it in the chats. I love it. I love the spew. But what can I say? I'm a spew whether I'm 0-3. I've come from the trenches from 0-7 to a playoff spot. So
yeah, for sure.
My talk.
Honestly, like you just said, you said it perfectly. Zv's team is sketchy. They're banged up. They're riddled. His stealing is high. We thought he was one of the best drafted teams on paper. But, man, you can't catch a break. He deserves to be an 0-3 team. I respect you on the, hey, man, I'm confident in my squad. I'm going to back him up. I'm going to talk that talk. I'm going to walk that walk. And that's why it's so important for the league to get balanced. I really hope that Vega can catch an L or Sevilla can catch an L. I have them winning this week, which is pretty unfortunate. But league balance is everything. Matchups are everything, as we all know. You've come back from playoffs. You were 0-5 that you said, and you made playoffs that year. So a run is possible. This is really where we see who can hunker down, who can find those matchups, who can really put their foot in the ground and put in that work. And that's what we're really trying to do here. That's what this podcast is about. We're trying to give you that edge, give you that advantage to really try and make you win that week. And it's going to be a huge week. Week 4, trends are set after 4 weeks. So after week 4, I don't know. Zv's talking about he might sell the ship. He might abandon ship on his squad. And I'm like, hey, man, you can do that. You can trade me some of these players. I'm going to get a draft pick or 2. I'll send you somebody for a talent. But you're going to be on that body issue photo, my friend. You're going to be posing. You're going to be making that calendar. I don't know. So, yeah, that really wraps it up. Not really too much drama this week. I know Zv and Ray have a very heated rivalry. They've always had that rivalry. They get chippy. So that should be really fun this week, man.
Yeah, I mean, Zv brings up things that make Ray go, ugh. So if we see something in the chat, I know Ray's about to pop off, and we're going to have some chirping going on. But
yes, sir.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. So if you wanna take us out.
Yeah, for sure. Ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been an absolute pleasure. Week 4, episode 4 of the podcast is a wrap. I just want to thank you guys, as always, for supporting us, subscribing to the channel, liking our videos, commenting. Please comment any feedback. Text me, text Austin, comment, anything like that. Reply to our Instagram stories when we post the episode is live. Anything that you guys would like to see or anything that you think that we can do better on, please give us the feedback, because that's all I want. I want feedback. I want reception. I want to make the product as best as I can. And I'm just so thankful for you guys. I love doing this. Every week I look forward to doing the podcast. I feel like every week we just get smoother and smoother with the transitions. And yeah, just thank you guys so much for everything. With that being said, I believe that we will have a new host joining us next week. Mr. Raekwon James will be a solidified host moving on, starting with episode 5 next week. Daniel was unfortunately not able to do it this week. He was supposed to be a host, but Hurricane Ian, as many of our Florida residents know, struck hard, and he is in Orlando over there, so he got hit hard. So prayers up to everybody who's dealing with this hurricane right here out in Fort Myers, Fort Pierce, Sanibel, the Keys, Cuba. We pray for you all. But Daniel's just going to be a guest on the show now. The schedules aren't really linking up. So Daniel's going to be a guest. He's welcomed anytime he'd like. We appreciate the spew. He's a Schwep champion. He's been to 2 other Super Bowls that he's lost. So his fantasy opinion is very highly coveted to me, and I know to Austin as well. But yeah, Mr. Raekwon James, I'm very excited to have you on the pod next week. I know you've been looking forward to this. With that being said, that's a wrap for me, ladies and gentlemen. I'll give it to Austin, and that's that.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. I mean, we say that every week, but I just want to highlight prayers up to everybody who's affected by Hurricane Ian. It's just devastating what's going on up in Fort Myers, or over in Fort Myers. So prayers up to them, and thank you to everybody who's watching. I mean, it's unbelievable. We're at week 4 already, and it's just like moving so quickly. But this is so much fun. Like every week we get our little like papers ready. We got our notes, and we just like spew in the chat like, all right, man, it's time to pod. It's time to pod. So I really thank everybody for watching. And with that, I mean, this is it. We're ready for week 4. Let's see, go Dolphins tonight. Hopefully they can take a dub, and let's move into week 4 and have fun.
Yes, sir. Go Dolphins, baby. 4-0 on the come up. Yes, sir. You know the name. You know the vibes.
All right. Peace out, everybody.
Peace out, y'all.